Much better. Got you loud and clear.
Perfect. Got you loud and clear as well. Glad I fixed it.
Good afternoon from Mission Control in Houston and the International Space Station Flight Control Room. As the orbital sunset passes over the orbital complex, you saw briefly a view of the SpaceX Dragon Endeavour. That will be the ride home a few hours from now for the Crew-11 crew, returning to Earth a few weeks ahead of schedule, but feeling in good shape as they reported earlier today, working through the pre-departure timeline as they prepared to complete a 167-day mission with a splashdown off the coast of California in the wee hours on Thursday morning. You're looking inside the International Space Station. A variety of crew members are working to complete the final stowage of items inside the Dragon Endeavour. This has been ongoing for the past several hours. The crew has been running a few minutes behind schedule. The current undocking time for Endeavour to begin the trip home for the 4 crew members, the Dragon Commander Zena Cardman of NASA, the pilot Mike Fink of NASA, Mission Specialist Number 1, who is Kimiya Yui of the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Oleg Platonov, who's Mission Specialist Number 2. The undocking time of 4:05 p.m. Central Time, 5:05 p.m. Eastern Time, is likely to be pushed back by a few minutes. We do have a 1-hour undocking window available for the crew today to meet their splashdown target off the coast of California. The phasing or the time frame between undocking and splashdown is expected to be about 10.5 hours for the Crew-11 crew. If you recall, back on January 7th, NASA announced it was postponing a planned spacewalk originally scheduled for January 8th, while the team monitored a medical concern with a crew member currently working on board the International Space Station. That crew member at that time and in subsequent days has been and currently is in stable condition. NASA announced the following day its decision to return Crew-11 back to Earth from the International Space Station earlier than originally planned in order to properly monitor the crew member's health on the ground. If you have been following along with us, back on Monday there was a change of command ceremony that was planned all along right before Crew-11 had intended to depart the International Space Station, where Mike Fink, the station commander, handed over the keys to the complex to Russian cosmonaut Sergei Kud-Sverchkov, who is the current space station commander and will remain the space station commander until the time frame just before he departs, along with his Soyuz crewmates, Chris Williams of NASA and Roscosmos cosmonaut Sergei Mikheyev. That is expected to occur in the midsummer time frame. So the current undocking time is not known specifically right now. We had expected it to be 4:05 p.m. Central Time, 5:05 p.m. Eastern Time. That will be pushed back, we expect, by a few minutes, but we do expect to be able to undock within the current window. Again, the crew running a few minutes behind schedule based on their late stowage of cargo aboard Dragon, the Endeavour, that this 4-member crew launched in back on August 1st, arriving at the International Space Station back on August 2nd. Today's return of the Crew-11 crew will wrap up a 167-day mission aboard while in orbit, 165 days of which aboard the International Space Station. The crew will have completed 2,672 orbits of the Earth in a mission spanning 70.8 million statute miles. For first-time flyers, Zena Cardman and Oleg Platonov, they are completing their first flight into space of 167 days. Mike Fink is wrapping up his 4th flight into space, and at the time of splashdown early Thursday morning, will have totaled 549 days in space, putting him 4th among all NASA astronauts on the list, 20th on the all-time list for most cumulative days of spaceflight. Kimiya Yui, with 167 days in space on this, his 2nd flight, will have logged 309 days in space. The weather off the coast of California, where Endeavour will be splashing down early Thursday morning, is excellent. The team has been monitoring weather conditions over the past several days, and the last weather briefing that was conducted earlier this morning indicated that we expect pristine conditions off the coast of California for the homecoming of the Crew-11 crew. Splashdown is currently scheduled at 2:41 a.m. Central Time, 3:41 a.m. Eastern Time, which is 12:41 a.m. Pacific Time on Thursday morning. Once again, just to recap, the Crew-11 crew originally had been scheduled to return to Earth in the February 20th time frame. So that return to Earth having been accelerated by about 4 weeks from its original target due to the issue that arose aboard the International Space Station last Wednesday. However, the crew member affected a week ago is in stable condition, has been ever since, and the crew, in fact, reported earlier today that they're all feeling very well and are ready to begin the trip back to Earth, which will span about 10.5 hours to a splashdown off the coast of California and a completion to this mission. That will set the stage for the International Space Station to be occupied by just 3 crew members for a 4-week period, not unprecedented. The commander of the station, Sergei Sverchkov of Roscosmos, his Russian colleague Sergei Mikheyev, and NASA's Chris Williams will carry the load for about a month until the arrival of the Crew-12 crew that is scheduled to launch in February to begin their own 6-month mission aboard the International Outpost and initially re-up the station population from 3 crew members to 7 crew members. Crew 12 consisting of the commander, Jessica Meir of NASA, along with NASA's Jack Hathaway, who will be the Crew 12 pilot, along with Sophie Adano of the European Space Agency, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Andrei Fedyaev. This view from Hawthorne, California, and the SpaceX Mission Control Center, working in tandem with the flight control team here in Houston. It is the Orbit 2 team of flight controllers on console today here in Houston who are following along with the pre-undocking preparations. Once again, the crew is soon to complete its suit up into their SpaceX launch and entry suits before floating through the hatchway on the zenith port of the Harmony module of the International Space Station, and behind them they'll close the hatch to Dragon Endeavour and begin final preparations for the undocking. A specific undocking time will be finalized once we actually close the hatch to Endeavour a short time from now. Once again, we're running a few minutes behind schedule, but we do expect to be able to undock well within the 1-hour window that's available for Dragon's departure today. And again, the burn plan for all of the departure burns and the rendezvous profile for the phasing to bring Endeavour home for a splashdown off the coast of California will be refined and amended to give us the proper splashdown time that has been set of 2:41 a.m. Central Time, 12:41 a.m. Pacific Time early Thursday morning. Endeavour is in good shape. All of its systems are ready to support the undocking from the zenith or space-facing port of the Harmony module of the International Space Station. Once the undocking command is issued, several activities will be undertaken, the first of which is the retraction of the umbilical basically a power and data cable that Dragon draws power from the International Space Station during its docked time frame aboard the complex. Then 2 sets of hooks, 6 hooks per gang, will begin to open up. Set 1 first, followed in short order by hook set 2. All 12 hooks will open up, and then the physical separation will be broken between Endeavour and the zenith or space-facing port of the Harmony module of the International Space Station, to which it has been linked for the past 165 days. There will be a series of undocking burns, first 1.5 seconds in duration, then 5 seconds in duration, and then what is called departure burn 0, a 16-second burn. This creates an opening rate between Endeavour and the International Space Station, ultimately enabling it to exit what is called the keep-out sphere, the first of 2 cylindrical boundaries, if you will, in the neighborhood of the International Space Station, followed in short order by the exit of what is called the approach ellipsoid, which I refer to as the neighborhood of the International Space Station. At that point, joint operations will come to a close, and the flight control team here in Houston will hand over exclusive control of Endeavour's flight back to Earth to the SpaceX flight control team in Hawthorne, California.
And sketching you up, we're working procedure 2.103, so 2.6.
We copy. Thank you.
Here in Mission Control in Houston, in the bow tie, that is Flight Director Ronak Dave. He is the lead flight director associated with the Crew-11 mission. At the top of your screen is spacecraft communicator Matt Dunne, D-U-N-N-E, for those who will be spelling that out for print purposes. Matt Dunne will be the communicator talking to the Crew-11 crew through undocking and through its exit from the approach ellipsoid that will be coming up a bit later this afternoon. Inside Dragon, some of the crew members already beginning to strap into their seats. We do expect to have views inside Dragon here shortly. But again, the crew is still in the process of completing the stowage of a few cargo items to be brought back to Earth aboard Dragon. Over the past week, the NASA team, the SpaceX team, the international partners have all worked in close concert with one another to facilitate this earlier than planned departure of Crew-11 from the International Space Station. That earlier departure done out of an abundance of caution following the issue that occurred 1 week ago, in which teams monitored a medical concern with one of the crew members living and working aboard the international outpost. That crew member was and continues to be in stable condition. And again, I will reiterate that earlier today, the crew reported that it was feeling great and ready to come home for a splashdown in the early morning hours on Thursday off the coast of California. This is Mission Control Houston. We do expect to receive interior views in the Dragon Endeavour here momentarily. You're looking at a view of NASA's Chris Williams aboard the International Space Station.
Checking. Hey, and Chris, you can temp stow those in node 2 right now. At the end of the day, we'll put them in the docking mechanism accessories kit.
And while spacecraft communicator Matt Dunn talks to Chris Williams inside the International Space Station, our first view inside Dragon, a good view of NASA's Mike Fink. To his left is the Dragon commander, Zena Cardman of NASA. Another view from another camera showing Cardman in the foreground. The other crew members who are all suited up now are Kimiya Yui of the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency and Oleg Platonov of Roscosmos. They are working through pre-departure preparations, running through several checklists that will culminate with the closing of the hatch that will enable us to get a more refined time frame for the actual undocking of Endeavour. Keep in mind that the undocking begins with an undocking command that first retracts the umbilical that attaches Endeavour to International Space Station power and data capability. That follows with the opening of 2 sets of hooks, 6 hooks per set.
Procedure 2.103, step 2.9. Dragon cabin configuration for departure complete.
All right, Zena, SpaceX copies. Dragon cabin configuration for departure is complete. 2.9.
One of the items the crew completed was the swapping out of a lithium hydroxide canister that will enable the scrubbing of carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere within Endeavour during its free flight back to Earth, and a splashdown in the wee hours on Thursday morning off the coast of California. Here in Mission Control, the reports are the crew is running just a few minutes behind schedule with their pre-departure preparations. You can see there in the on the right side of your screen, Roscosmos cosmonaut Oleg Platonov, and in the center of your screen, NASA's Mike Fink, who is wrapping up his 4th flight into space today.
Push-to-talk destination is set to station.
We'll be standing by for the actual closing of the hatch to Dragon, and we'll mark that time for you, and we'll be able to provide a more refined time for undocking a short time from now. We will indicate, however, that we will, per our programming plan, go back on the air at 3:45 p.m. Central Time, 4:45 p.m. Eastern Time with our undocking coverage, regardless of any adjustment to that undocking time. This is Mission Control Houston, once again
SpaceX on the big loop for hatch
looking at
closure.
views inside the Dragon Endeavour, which is currently mated to the space-facing port of the Harmony module of the International Space Station. In the foreground is
Xena, we are
Endeavour
going to be
Commander
performing
Xena
a LIO
Cardman.
cartridge
To
swap
her right,
LIO
NASA's Mike
cartridge
Fink.
2. That's LIO cartridge 2. And at this time, you are go to complete the LIO configuration, IMV teardown, and hatch closure per the procedure 2.103. When you're complete, you can execute instructions on hatch closed event details, and then finish chute dawning per 4.010.
Okay, copy. We will be swapping the LIO to cartridge 2. We are go for that configuration, as well as IMV teardown and hatch closure per procedure 2.103. And then we will close out 4.010, completing those actions.
And Xena Cardman acknowledging that call from the core. That's the acronym for the Crew Operations Resource Engineer, basically the SpaceX communicator in Hawthorne, California, with instructions on several procedures that will precede the actual closing of the hatch to Endeavour, that will set the stage for our undocking sometime in the neighborhood right after 4:05 p.m. Central Time, 5:05 p.m. Eastern Time, within a 55-minute time frame after that. As the flight control team here works to recompute our exact undocking time, we would offer to you that the burn plan by SpaceX Ballistics and the flight control team in Hawthorne will be adjusted so that we wind up with the same splashdown time, give or take. In the wee hours of Thursday morning, the current splashdown time scheduled at 2:41 a.m. Central Time, 12:41 a.m. Pacific Time. Once Dragon Endeavour departs the station, there will be a series of firings of the Draco thrusters to create an opening rate between Endeavour and the International Space Station. It will move to a safe distance away from the complex for the deorbit burn that is scheduled at 1:51 a.m. Central Time, 2:51 a.m. Eastern Time Thursday morning. That will be a 13-minute, 15-second retrograde burn, basically a braking maneuver, to slow Endeavour down by about 87.5 meters per second, allowing it to begin the entry back into the Earth's atmosphere.
Back, we're continuing to Dragon hatch closure at 3.6 alpha.
All right, SpaceX copies. We're with you at 3.6 alpha.
We're complete 3.6 alpha, 3.7. We'll wait for ISS side 3.6 Bravo. We will be ready when you are for closing the Dragon hatch.
All right, we copy that. Xena, waiting on 3.6 Bravo.
Decimal 6 Bravo is now complete. So we are closing the Dragon hatch for the decal.
SpaceX copies.
We are nearing the point of hatch closure on the Dragon Endeavour. Just a few more steps required by the crew. They're all suited up inside the vehicle, ready to begin about a 10.5-hour journey following undocking to a splashdown at 2:41 a.m. Central Time, 12:41 a.m. Pacific Time off the coast of California on Thursday morning.
SpaceX Dragon hatch is closed with the hatch indicator on the red.
SpaceX copies, hatch closed, and the indicator is verified.
And Xena Cardman confirming that Dragon's hatch is closed at 2:29 p.m. Central Time, 3:29 p.m. Eastern Time. So the first step on the road home for the Crew-11 crew now complete, as we stand by for other pre-departure preparations to be undertaken prior to the undocking of Endeavour from the space-facing port of the Harmony module. Again, hatch closure for Endeavour marked at 2:29 p.m. Central, 3:29 p.m. Eastern Time.
SpaceX Dragon big boost PPRB ISO valve in location 1 is verified open. Dragon interior is secure, waiting for your go for procedures.
SpaceX copies all, Xena, and report for PPRV. Good news, your go to step into procedures per the event details. We'll look for completing 4.010 for suit donning and report when complete.
So section 4 of 4.010 will complete.
Houston, Houston, station on 2. We're complete with our sides of step 3. Do you need those photos downlink now, or should we just proceed with step 4?
Checking. And Chris, we'll take the photos when we get them whenever, so we're ready for step 4. No rush.
NASA's Chris Williams reporting closeout photos prior to Dragon's upcoming departure. We're in the process of completing the refinement of an undocking time, but we only expect it to be just a few minutes behind the original plan. In this view inside Dragon Endeavour, in the foreground is Roscosmos cosmonaut Oleg Platonov, wrapping up his first flight into space. Across the spectrum of this view is the pilot of Endeavour, Mike Fink of NASA. To his left, Zena Cardman, the commander of the vehicle. And just out of the field of view is Kimiya Yui of the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency.
Okay.
Station and Dragon, this is Houston on the Big Loop for new undock time. We caught up on some of our time. New undock is 22:15. That is 2215. How copy?
Okay, 2215 for our new updated undock time.
That's good readback.
And Houston's spacecraft communicator, Matt Dunn, reporting to Endeavour Commander Zena Cardman that our new updated undocking time, the undocking command itself that triggers the umbilical retraction and the opening of the hooks is going to be at 4:15 p.m. Central Time, 5:15 p.m. Eastern Time, but the actual physical separation that we mark undocking to will be 5 minutes after that. So we expect physical separation of Endeavour from the station at 4:20 p.m. Central Time, 5:20 p.m. Eastern Time.
Ready to copy.
I can report that the control of cabin air temperature via 4.080 is now allowed until pre-chill. Note that the hex is currently configured for maximum cooling.
Copy, thanks. We've got 4.080 as an option for temperature adjustment.
This is Mission Control Houston. Once again, the view inside the Dragon Endeavour as the International Space Station flies smoothly on 260 statute miles above the Earth. The station is currently tracking from northwest to southeast across the west coast of Australia in an orbit inclined 51.6 degrees to either side of the equator. In the foreground is Endeavour Commander Zena Cardman. To her right, pilot Mike Fink. The two NASA astronauts joined by Roscosmos cosmonaut Oleg Platonov and Kimiya Yui of the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency. The four crew members soon to begin the journey from the station back to Earth, about a 10.5-hour journey that will result in a splashdown off the coast of California in the early morning hours on Thursday. Splashdown planned for 2:41 a.m. Central Time, 12:41 a.m. Pacific Time.
103, moving on to 4.7 now.
Copy. Moving on to step 4.7. We're with you.
The Crew-11 crew departing a few weeks ahead of schedule to complete a mission of 167 days in duration, 165 days of which will have been aboard the station, 2,672 orbits of the Earth in a mission that will have spanned 70.8 million statute miles. Cardman and Platonov, wrapping up their first flights respectively, will have logged 167 days in space.
4.011, but hold in section 1.
Activating 4.011, but holding in section 1.
The core, or the crew operations resource engineer at SpaceX Mission Control in Hawthorne, California, now working through their timelines. The next step will be leak checks for the four crew members on their launch and entry suits. Cardman and Platonov will have logged 167 days in space at the completion of their first flight. Mike Fink, with this mission, wrapping up his fourth flight into space, and a total of 549 days in space, good for fourth among all NASA astronauts and 20th on the all-time list for aggregate days in space. Kimiya Yui, in the completion of his second flight into space, will have totaled 309 days off the planet.
Hey, Zena, you are go to complete Section 1 suit leak check preparations. We are still performing some final reconfigurations on the ground before we complete Section 2, but you are go for Section 1.
We go for section 1 only. We'll hold before section 2.
Throughout the course of the day today, all of the departure preparations have gone smoothly. Again, the crew reported earlier today that it was feeling in great shape, the Crew-11 crew, ready to come home to wrap up their mission, albeit a few weeks ahead of schedule. They completed the final stowage of cargo aboard Endeavour, and just a few minutes ago, at 2:29 p.m. Central Time, 3:29 p.m. Eastern Time, closed the hatch to Endeavour, leaving behind on the International Space Station the newly minted station commander Sergei Kud-Sverchkov of Roscosmos, along with his Roscosmos colleague Sergei Mikheyev and NASA's Chris Williams, who will be a three-man crew for the next 4 weeks until the arrival next month of the Crew-12 crew.
SpaceX Dragon, big loop, just 1.8 TRS complete. We are pausing at 1.9.
SpaceX copies on the big loop. And that's good timing. Ground has verified system reconfigurations for hatch closure are complete and nominal. You are go to proceed to Section 2. Report when ready to pressurize.
Copy, go for Section 2 and Volco.
And the Corps, the Crew Operations Resource Engineer in Hawthorne, California, giving the crew the go-ahead to begin suit pressurization for leak checks on their launch and entry suits. This part of the routine series of procedures that will lead to the new undocking time that is marked at physical separation, the new undocking time of 4:20 p.m. Central Time, 5:20 p.m. Eastern Time.
SpaceX Dragon, sub 2.2, ready to pressurize.
SpaceX copies. You are go for 2.3. Initiate suit leak check.
Copy, go for 2.3.
And the report is the suits are being pressurized for the 4 crew members aboard Endeavour. Again, part of the routine leak check activities that will ensure that those suits are airtight and ready to support the undocking of Endeavour from the International Space Station. We're about 90 minutes away from the undocking command that will begin the process of retracting the umbilical that has provided power to Dragon during its docked stay aboard the International Space Station. That will be followed by the opening of 2 sets of hooks, 12 hooks in all, that will break the physical separation between Dragon and the zenith or space-facing port of the International Space Station, allowing the beginning of several burns of the Draco thrusters to create an opening rate for Dragon as it drifts away from the international outpost. The deorbit burn that will begin Endeavour's trip home out of low Earth orbit is scheduled at 1:51 a.m. Central Time, 2:51 a.m. Eastern Time, Thursday morning. That will be a 13-minute, 15-second braking maneuver to slow Endeavour down by 87.5 meters per second, allowing it to drop out of orbit for its high-speed entry back into the Earth's atmosphere.
Houston, station on 2, we're complete in step 4 of 2.103, moving on to step 5.
Copy all, we're with you in step 5.
SpaceX Dragon, sub 2.5, nominal seat check.
SpaceX copies on the big loop. We concur 4 nominal E-checks. Dragon, SpaceX. This is a comm check on Dragon to ground. I do see that Mike has his push-to-talk set to ground, if he can respond.
SpaceX Dragon, C3 speaking. Howdy. Clear.
All right, howdy, C3. Loud and clear as well. Good Dragon to ground comm check.
This is Mission Control Houston. With the successful completion of the leak checks on the 4 crew members for Crew-11 aboard the Dragon Endeavour, 4 good suits reported and confirmed by the SpaceX engineers at their mission control room in Hawthorne, California. So just a quick recap, the crew loaded all of the cargo aboard Endeavour that will be brought back to Earth for a splashdown in the wee hours Thursday morning off the coast of California. They closed the hatch between the station and Dragon at 2:29 p.m. Central Time, 3:29 p.m. Eastern Time. All of this pointing towards the undocking of Dragon from the space-facing port of the Harmony module of the International Space Station. The updated undocking time is now scheduled at 4:20 p.m. Central, 5:20 p.m. Eastern Time, leading to a splashdown early Thursday morning off the coast of California at 2:41 a.m. Central, 12:41 a.m. Pacific Time. There's a view of the Dragon Endeavour with the 4 crew members in good shape, all suited up, ready to begin the journey home to wrap up 167 days in space. We will be back within the hour for the undocking coverage, in which we'll be joined by Hawthorne, California, and SpaceX. For all of that activity, be sure to tune us back in at 3:45 p.m. Central, 4:45 p.m. Eastern Time for undocking of Endeavour from the International Space Station to begin the journey back to Earth. For now, we'll wrap up our hatch closure coverage. This is Mission Control Houston. You are looking live inside the International Space Station Flight Control Room here at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, where the flight control team belonging to Orbit 2 has just taken a poll of its flight control team, and all positions have polled go for the upcoming undocking of the SpaceX Dragon Endeavour, with the 4 Crew-11 crew members on board to start a 10.5-hour journey back to Earth and a splashdown off the coast of San Diego in the wee hours on Thursday morning. Good afternoon. I'm NASA's Rob Navius from the Office of Communications. We'll be joined momentarily by SpaceX's Ronnie Foreman out in Hawthorne, California. The 4 Crew-11 crew members, Endeavour Commander Zena Cardman, pilot Mike Fink, Kimiya Yui of the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Oleg Platonov. They're all suited up in their launch and entry suits, having performed leak checks. The hatch was closed a few hours ago between Endeavour and the International Space Station as we point to an undocking time of 4:20 p.m. Central Time, 2:20 p.m. Pacific Time to start that journey home for Crew-11, albeit a few weeks ahead of schedule. On January 7th, the agency announced that it was postponing a planned spacewalk originally scheduled for January 8th, while teams monitored a medical concern with a crew member currently living and working on board the International Outpost. Since then, that crew member has been stable, with no issues reported. That crew member forcing NASA to decide rather rapidly the following day that it was going to return Crew-11 to Earth a few weeks ahead of schedule, with the intent in mind to properly monitor the crew member's health in returning to space and once back on Earth. Again, joining us today from SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California, to talk about all the specifics about the final preparations leading up to undocking is Ronnie Foreman. Ronnie, great to have you with us today.
Thanks very much, Rob. Crew-11 is the 11th crew rotation mission for Dragon and its 12th flight with NASA's Commercial Crew Program. As you mentioned, Crew-11 launched last year aboard a Falcon 9 rocket on August 1st, 2025, and docked with the station the next day. Right now, the crew is currently suited, and the Dragon and station hatches are both sealed in preparation for Dragon's departure. Once Dragon undocks, the crew's flight home is expected to last about 10.5 hours. We're seeing live views of the crew inside the spacecraft on your screen there. Shortly after separation, Dragon will use its Draco thrusters to move away from the station in a series of carefully choreographed maneuvers, or departure burns, to increase the distance between the spacecraft and the space station. Dragon will also execute a phasing burn to lower its orbit and line the spacecraft up with its landing location. Following phasing, Dragon will complete deorbit, re-entry, and splashdown. During the deorbit sequence, several events will occur, including trunk separation, closure of the nose cone, a deorbit burn, deployment of the drogue and main parachutes, and finally splashdown. Of course, the Crew-11 astronauts will be able to follow all of that on the screens inside the spacecraft that you see there right now. Dragon is targeted to splash down off the coast of San Diego, California on Thursday, January 15th at approximately 12:41 a.m. Pacific, which is 2:41 a.m. Central, where it will be picked up by a SpaceX recovery vessel, and our recovery teams will help egress or exit the crew from the spacecraft.
The 4 crew members on board the Dragon Endeavour, who are just minutes away from departing the International Space Station, Zena Cardman, Mike Fink, Kimiya Yui, and Oleg Platonov, they will have completed 167 days in space, 165 days on board the International Space Station. They will have completed 2,672 orbits of the Earth, a journey of 70.8 million statute miles. Cardman and Platonov wrapping up their first flights, respectively, away from the planet and logged 167 days in space. Mike Fink is wrapping up his 4th flight into space, a total of 549 days in all. That puts him 4th on the all-time list amongst NASA astronauts, 20th on the all-time list for most aggregate days in space. Kimiya Yui of the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency is coming home after his second flight away from the planet and a total of 309 days in space.
Also on board the space station is NASA astronaut Chris Williams, as well as cosmonauts Sergei Kutsverkov and Sergei Mikheyev. Now, just like the approach to the International Space Station, Dragon's departure and deorbit are designed to be fully autonomous, requiring no action from the crew on board. NASA astronaut Chris Williams helped our crew members prepare for departure today and will be watching from the cupola, but the prime departure monitoring role falls on Zena Cardman from inside Dragon. Mission control in both Houston and Hawthorne will back up our crew as we step them through undocking today. The station crew have been busy preparing to send our astronauts home. Rob Navius has more on what we can expect until Dragon departs from station. Rob?
The road toward the undocking of the International Space Station just a few minutes from now began actually with the decision by NASA last week to bring the Crew-11 crew home just a few weeks ahead of schedule, originally targeted for a homecoming about the third week in February. They had that time frame accelerated in a decision that was reached by NASA, the international partners, and SpaceX, all of whom have worked diligently to accelerate the time frame for this return back to Earth. Back on Monday, Mike Fink, the commander of the space station, participated along with the rest of his crewmates on the station in a change of command ceremony in which he handed over command of the station to Sergei Kutsverkov, the Roscosmos cosmonaut. This would have occurred regardless of when Crew-11 was ready to depart. But the change of command was conducted on Monday morning. Earlier today, as the crew began final preparations prior to undocking, the crew reported that it was feeling very well, in good shape, ready to begin the journey back to Earth that will start with the undocking command that is scheduled about 7 minutes from now. That command will trigger the retraction of an umbilical that has provided power to Dragon while docked to the zenith or space-facing port of the International Space Station. That will be followed by the opening of 2 sets of hooks. Those hooks, 6 hooks per set, they will open up to break the physical connection between the station and Dragon Endeavour. There will be a series of burns of the Draco thrusters to begin an opening rate by Dragon away from the station outside of what is called the approach ellipsoid, which is essentially the imaginary cylindrical boundary of the neighborhood of the International Space Station, at which point the joint operations between Mission Control here in Houston and the SpaceX Flight Control Team in Hawthorne will come to an end, and Hawthorne will take over exclusive control of the rest of Endeavour's flight back to Earth, which, as you heard Ronnie say earlier, will culminate in a splashdown early Thursday morning off the coast of San Diego at 12:41 a.m. Pacific Time, 2:41 a.m. Central Time. Ronnie, you have more details about what will be involved as we approach the time of the undocking command.
Thanks, Rob. So right now we are standing by for that next call from Mission Control, and we'll keep ourselves plugged in so that you can hear, as well as we can, the next updates from our team. Right now, separation is set for approximately 2:20 p.m. Pacific, 5:20 p.m. Eastern, which is just about 11 minutes from now. As we mentioned earlier, just like its approach to the space station, this departure for Dragon and the subsequent deorbit are designed to be fully autonomous, requiring no action from our crew. Departure is typically faster and easier, since the crew won't have to stop at any waypoints we see, like when the spacecraft arrives. We take particular care, as Rob noted, when we enter the approach ellipsoid and then when we depart again. Once the undocking sequence is complete, Dragon will use its Draco thrusters to move away from the station in a series of 4 departure burns, which are carefully choreographed spacecraft maneuvers that increase the distance between the spacecraft and the space station. From there, a phasing burn will place Dragon on a trajectory to align it with that splashdown site. As we've had a couple of views here on our screen previously, our crew is inside Dragon right now. They are suited up as we are entering a dynamic phase of flight. We may hear a call out for the crew to also pull their visors down ahead of that actual undocking event itself. So right now we are standing by for that go, no-go call to undock. And then we'll be waiting for the undocking sequence to begin. Once we get that call, it will take less than 5 minutes for Dragon to separate from the International Space Station, which has been its home for the last 6 months. At the planned undock time, SpaceX Mission Control will command the undock sequence start, which begins the automatic undocking process. The first step is for the umbilicals to retract. These umbilicals are electrical connections that connect Dragon systems to the space station, transferring power, telemetry, and commands between the two vehicles during Dragon's stay. Once that's complete, Dragon will unlatch itself, just like Rob described, releasing 12 hard capture hooks in 2 separate phases. All that combined will take just about 4.5 minutes, and then Dragon will be ready to depart from station and begin to move itself further and further away using those Draco thrusters. Dragon's initial departure from station, like I mentioned before, is a little bit different, and it's also different from other docked vehicles like the Soyuz that rely on springs to push them away from the docking port. Dragon will execute 2 short thruster firings to undock using a combination of 12 Draco thrusters around the base of the spacecraft, with the first burn breaking any stiction between Dragon and the docking port, and the second slowly backing the spacecraft away. We are expecting the call for the end sequence to begin in the next few minutes or so. As we continue to wait for that confirmation call for undocking, the view on your screen right now is at Mission Control Houston. Mission Control in Houston and our facility here in Hawthorne are connected to the International Space Station and the Crew-11 astronauts right now on a communications network known as the Big Loop. When we hear that call come through, you'll very likely hear whoever is speaking announce which loop they're speaking on so that we can follow along with the astronauts and understand who's in the loop. On the right-hand side of your screen now, you've got that view of Mission Control Hawthorne as well. So as Rob mentioned earlier, following deorbit and splashdown, Xena, Mike, Kimya, and Oleg will have spent 167 days in space, orbiting the Earth more than 2,600 times. Crew-11 saw the arrival of 5 visiting vehicles since their arrival in August, including SpaceX's CRS-33 resupply mission, Progress 93, Northrop Grumman's 23rd resupply mission, JAXA's HTV-X1, and Soyuz MS-28. They also saw the departure of 3 visiting vehicles, including NASA's SpaceX Crew-10, Progress 92, and Soyuz MS-27. Mike Fink will have spent 549 days in space, the 4th most cumulative spaceflight time by a U.S. astronaut and 20th on the all-time list, as Rob noted earlier. Kimya Yui
on the Big Loop, undock sequence commanded.
So there we heard the call out from Mission Control that we are go for undock and the receipt of that command from Dragon. With Dragon now getting ready to undock, Rob will take us through that process. Rob?
Okay, Ronnie, thanks very much. The International Space Station is currently flying just off the southwest coast of Australia at an altitude of 260 statute miles. As you've indicated, the undocking command has been issued.
On the big loop, umbilical demate complete and nominal. Umbilical demate complete and nominal.
The hooks are beginning to drive. Again, 2 sets of hooks, 12 hooks in all. Once they're open, then Dragon will be free to begin its journey away from the Earth, from the space-facing port of the Harmony module of the International Space Station. There will be a series of burns. There will be 2 so-called undocking burns. The first will be 1.5 seconds in duration, the second 5 seconds in duration, followed by 2 so-called departure burns, one of 16 seconds in duration, the second of 22 seconds in duration. That will accelerate Dragon's rate of separation from the international outpost to a point in which it will exit the so-called keep-out sphere, and then ultimately the approach ellipsoid to begin the rest of its journey. Even though the undocking is coming about 15 minutes behind schedule, based on the work that was required to prepare the crew for undocking, this will not affect the rest of the timeline. There will be some burn adjustments made by the SpaceX engineers in Hawthorne, but it will all lead to a splashdown off the coast of San Diego for the 4 Crew-11 crew members at 2:41 a.m. Central Time, 12:41 a.m. Pacific Time to wrap up this 167-day mission. This view of Endeavour at the zenith or space-facing port of the Harmony module, what Ronnie mentioned, the CRS-33 cargo craft, that is docked to the forward port of the Harmony module and will remain in place until after the next crew, the Crew-12 crew, arrives at the station in a few weeks.
First set of hooks open, nominal. First set of hooks open, nominal.
Copy.
The second set of hooks now beginning to open. We are committed to an undocking, standing by for those hooks to fully retract. The departure of Endeavour will leave Sergei Kud-Sverchkov, NASA's Chris Williams, and Roscosmos' Sergei Mikheyev as a 3-man crew for the next few weeks until Crew-12 arrives. The interface between Dragon and the station has no longer been sealed. Standing by for physical separation. About 20 seconds away from physical separation.
Dragon SpaceX, all hooks open, nominal. SpaceX, all hooks open, nominal.
Dragon copies.
Undocking confirmed. Endeavour begins its journey home with the Crew-11 crew. Undocking
Dragon
confirmed.
SpaceX, separation confirmed. Dragon SpaceX, separation confirmed.
Dragon copies, stay the same. Dragon copies, stay the same.
good undocking burn, 4:20 p.m. Central Time, 5:20 p.m. Eastern Time for undocking, as Dragon and the International Space Station flew 260 statute miles south of Australia.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Depart, burn 0 complete.
So we've had 3 good departure burns. The undocking burns 1 and 2, departure burn 0. So despite the accelerated nature of the timing of this undocking for Crew-11, the crew has executed everything by the book as they begin about a 10.5-hour journey to a splashdown off the coast of San Diego in the wee hours Thursday morning.
Houston Station on 2, ISS thrusters are enabled.
Houston copies.
That the voice of Chris Williams of NASA on board the station as we look inside Dragon over the shoulders of Zena Cardman and Mike Fink. We expect Dragon to exit the approach ellipsoid and for joint operations to conclude between Houston and Hawthorne in the neighborhood of about 4:40 p.m. Central, 5:40 p.m. Eastern Time. Coming up is Endeavour's departure and exit from the keep-out sphere, the first of these 2 boundaries that are used to essentially measure the neighborhood of the International Space Station during rendezvous and departure operations. Once again, the view over the shoulders of Zena Cardman and Mike Fink, Endeavour's commander and pilot, the 2 NASA astronauts, amongst the 4 Crew-11 crew members heading home for a splashdown early Thursday morning off the coast of San Diego. We're coming up on depart burn 1 and then the exit out of the keep-out sphere as you look at the flight control team at SpaceX's headquarters in Hawthorne, California.
As Rob mentioned, we are now standing by for that departure burn 1. And at this point, because Dragon has disconnected from the International Space Station, it's relying entirely on its own power sources from batteries and generated through solar cells, instead of taking power and telemetry from the space station. You can follow along with the telemetry that we're tracking in Mission Control at the bottom of your screen. When we step into this departure burn, you'll see the initial distance between Dragon and the space station increase further. You also may see the rate come back up. The thrusters on board the Dragon spacecraft are located in the service section, and this burn will last about 22 seconds. In that lower graphic right now, you can see that we're activating some of those micro adjustments as we follow along. Even though all of this is taking place very methodically and very slowly, both of these vehicles are traveling about 17,000 miles an hour. So this is a very carefully...
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop, depart burn 1 complete and nominal. This time, you are go to DOF suits per procedure 4.012. Reminder that ground will be deactivating the big loop following exit from the approach ellipsoid.
We are go for 4.012 suit doffing with a nominal depart burn, and we will be deconfiguring the big loop once we get out of the ellipsoid.
So we got confirmation there from Mission Control and a readback from Dragon that they have exited this dynamic phase of flight and can now take off their spacesuits. As I was mentioning, this is a pretty carefully choreographed set of maneuvers, but now that we're through departure burn 1, we know that we've exited the keep out sphere, which is a 200-meter radius invisible line around the International Space Station. Before moving into the keep out sphere, spacecraft have to be configured where they would not cross that imaginary boundary for at least 4 orbits, even if the spacecraft lost all maneuvering capability. This safety zone is set up to govern any visiting spacecraft, Dragon or any of the others we mentioned earlier in the webcast, when they're arriving or departing from the space station. Some beautiful views of the Earth from up in space there on your screen right now, too. And now that we are focused primarily on Dragon, as Rob mentioned, because the vehicles have now separated, you're following along with the speed and altitude of Dragon in the lower left-hand corner of your screen.
Dragon end station, this is Houston on the big loop. Dragon has exited the keep out sphere. Endeavour crew, enjoy the ride home.
Endeavour crew copies on the big loop. Thank you.
So there we heard confirmation from both teams again that we have exited that keep out sphere. And now we're waiting for Dragon to exit the approach ellipsoid, or AE for short, which is another imaginary shape. This time a 3-dimensional ellipsoid, kind of a football shape, measuring 4 kilometers by 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers in the same family as that keep out sphere. One of the key differences with the AE, though, is that vehicles outside of it have to be on what we call a 24-hour safe free drift trajectory. Instead of the 4 orbits we mentioned earlier, that means that a spacecraft would not cross into the approach ellipsoid for at least 24 hours again, even if it lost all maneuvering for that call-out, once we hear confirmation that Dragon is outside of the AE. So to recap what brought us to today, the hatches between the International Space Station and Dragon were closed earlier today at approximately
SpaceX Crew-11, cabin mic, com check, how do you read?
With our crew settled.
SpaceX has you loud and clear from the cabin mic.
We also loud and clear, thank you.
We just had good confirmations there that our Crew-11 team can hear Mission Control here in Hawthorne loud and clear. And our crew is beginning to settle in for that 10.5-hour journey back to Earth. So I'm going to toss it back to Rob over at NASA. Rob?
Thanks, Ronnie. The 2 spacecraft, Endeavour and the International Space Station, are currently flying just to the southeast of New Zealand, moving from southwest to northeast in an orbit inclined 51.6 degrees to either side of the equator. The range between Endeavour and the station will continue to open up to a safe distance that will lead in the wee hours Thursday at 1:51 a.m. Central Time, 2:51 a.m. Eastern Time, to a deorbit burn that will be a 13-minute, 15-second retrograde braking maneuver for Endeavour to slow the vehicle down by 87.5 meters per second. Just as is the case for any returning vehicle from low Earth orbit velocity, this will enable Endeavour to enter back into the Earth's atmosphere for all of the key activities that will be associated with its 50-minute return trip through the atmosphere, through the area of peak heating, a brief period of a loss of signal while plasma builds up around the Dragon itself, and then a reacquisition of signal prior to the deployment of drogue chutes and the main chutes that will enable Dragon to gently splash down off the coast of San Diego at 2:41 a.m. Central Time, 12:41 a.m. Pacific Time, early Thursday morning, wrapping up a 167-day mission. Once again, Crew-11 is on its way home a few weeks earlier than originally had been anticipated, but the crew is in good shape, ready for its arrival in the Pacific Ocean for a splashdown in the early morning hours on Thursday, where the SpaceX recovery team will quickly move into action to hoist the Dragon onto the well deck of the recovery ship and extract the crew, with their mission now having been completed. Everything has gone by the book. Endeavour in good shape. The International Space Station now crewed by 3 people, Chris Williams of NASA, Sergei Sverchkov, and Sergei Mikheyev of Roscosmos. They will be a 3-man crew for the next few weeks until the arrival of the Crew-12 crew on the next SpaceX Crew Dragon that will be launched from the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. With that, we'll wrap it up from Mission Control here in Houston and go back to Ronnie Foreman at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne.
Thanks so much, Rob. With that, Crew-11 has officially departed the International Space Station. As we continue to move a safe distance from the station, we are preparing for that deorbit burn that Rob mentioned. Again, Dragon is targeted to splash down off the coast of San Diego at approximately 12:41 a.m. Pacific Time, followed by the crew getting picked up at sea by a SpaceX recovery vessel. As they rest up, our teams here will continue to keep an eye on the weather to ensure a safe return for our Dragon and Crew-11 astronauts. In case you are just joining us, we are following along as our Crew-11 astronauts depart the International Space Station. And right now we're standing by for Dragon to exit the approach ellipsoid, or AE, which is an imaginary football shape that is about 4 kilometers by 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers in the same family as the keep-out sphere, and basically governs the neighborhood of the International Space Station. One of the key differences between the approach ellipsoid that you see on the outside on the graphic in your screen and the keep-out sphere, which is that smaller inner circle, is that vehicles inside of the AE right now, or where we are right now, are on what we call a 24-hour safe free drift trajectory. That means that the spacecraft would not cross into the approach ellipsoid for at least 24 hours again, even if it lost all maneuvering. So we are standing by for that call out to hear that we have exited the AE and that our Crew-11 astronauts continue on their way home. Now, to recap, earlier today, the hatches between the International Space Station and Dragon were closed. Since then, the crew has settled in to begin their 10.5-hour journey back to Earth. The joint NASA and SpaceX teams pulled go to proceed with undocking, and the undock command was then sent, followed by umbilical retraction and hook opening, with physical separation taking place right on schedule at 2:20 p.m. Pacific, as the space station and Dragon were traveling about 260 statute miles south of Australia. Dragon then completed 2 of 4 departure burns and exited the keep-out sphere. We are again now standing by from Dragon crossing the approach ellipsoid to set the spacecraft and Crew-11 up for their path back to Earth. On Splashdown tomorrow, we'll be marking the completion of a long-duration science and research mission for these 4 astronauts and the astronauts that were part of the broader expedition who are still on board the International Space Station. So because Dragon is still inside the approach ellipsoid, we are still currently in joint operations. And you're watching Mission Control Houston and Mission Control Hawthorne working together in the 2 different blocks on your screen. We mentioned this earlier in the webcast too, but you can follow along with Dragon's telemetry in the bottom of your screen. We just had that range measurement come up that you can track, looking at just about 800 meters away from the International Space Station right now. We're also tracking right now that about 1,000 meters or 1 kilometer is going to be the right boundary of that approach ellipsoid. So right now we're watching the number increase, which is exactly what we want to see as our Crew-11 astronauts depart the space station. Again, we are standing by right now for that departure from the approach ellipsoid. You can keep following that, as I mentioned, in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. That is the distance between Dragon and the International Space Station. And we think we'll hit that 1,000-meter, 1-kilometer mark here in just about another minute. If you were with us earlier in the broadcast, you know that we had great views of Dragon as it left the International Space Station. But now that we've moved away from it and we are on the darker side of the Earth, our views have gone offline for now. Obviously, we're still in touch with our astronauts, and we'll bring those images back to you either later in this broadcast or when we pick it up later this evening to follow splashdown and recovery of our Crew-11 astronauts. Coming up on about 970 meters away from the International Space Station. So we should hear that call out any second that we have exited the approach ellipsoid. Tracking 1 kilometer on your screen right there. So right now we're just waiting for that call out over the big loop between Mission Control Houston on the left and Mission Control Hawthorne on the right.
Dragon, SpaceX on the big loop. Dragon has exited the approach ellipsoid and is on a safe free drift trajectory. Houston will be taking down the big loop shortly. Expect ISS audio traffic to cease. Following final comms, request swap of audio destination to Dragon to ground. Post swap, contact ground on Dragon to ground via the cabin mic for a comm check.
Dragon copies. In work.
So that announcement we just heard from Mission Control Hawthorne officially marks departure from the approach ellipsoid and the end of joint operations. That's why you heard our team explaining how communications protocols would change from here through the end of the mission. Crew-11 has officially departed the International Space Station, and now we'll expect them back here on Earth about 10.5 hours from now, again splashing down off the coast of San Diego. The crew is currently doffing or removing their spacesuits to settle in for that ride home. Splashdown should be early tomorrow morning at 12:41 a.m. Pacific Time, 2:41 a.m. Central, followed by the crew getting picked up at sea by a SpaceX recovery vessel. As they rest up, our teams here will continue to keep an eye on the weather to ensure safe return for Dragon and our Crew-11 astronauts. Meanwhile, we'll rejoin you for live visual coverage starting roughly 1 hour prior to Splashdown, so we'll be back at about 11:40 p.m. Pacific. As always, you can find mission updates on X, at NASA, at SpaceX, and on the web at nasa.gov. Thanks very much for watching. We'll see you on our Crew-11 astronauts again soon.
Good morning, and thanks for joining our live coverage of the NASA SpaceX Crew-11 mission as it returns to Earth. I'm here in Mission Control Houston as the flight control team continues to monitor the return of NASA astronauts Zena Cardman and Mike Fink, JAXA's Kim Yayui, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Oleg Platonov. Crew-11 launched aboard a Falcon 9 rocket to the International Space Station on August 1st, 2025. On January 7th, the agency announced it was postponing a planned spacewalk originally scheduled for January 8th, while teams monitored a medical concern with a crew member living and working aboard the orbital laboratory. That crew member has been in stable condition. NASA announced the following day its decision to return Crew-11 to Earth from the International Space Station earlier than originally planned in order to properly monitor the crew member's health on the ground. Thanks for joining us today. I'm NASA's Leah Cheshire Mustachio, and I'm joined by my colleague at SpaceX in Hawthorne, California, Kate Tice.
Thanks, Leah. I'm Kate Tice, Senior Manager of Quality Systems Engineering here at SpaceX. Dragon departed the International Space Station at 5:20 p.m. Eastern Time. That was 2:20 p.m. Pacific yesterday for those of us here in California. They are now on their way to the targeted splashdown site off the coast of San Diego. Splashdown is planned for approximately 12:41 a.m. Pacific, 3:41 a.m. Eastern. Upon departing station, Dragon underwent a sequence of departure burns. The crew had a rest period and has since kicked off preparations for re-entry, including getting into their spacesuits and successfully performing a leak check. Dragon has a series of steps to complete before returning Crew-11 home.
First, Dragon will maneuver to the correct altitude and jettison its trunk, which is the cylindrical, unpressurized lower part of the spacecraft. The trunk is currently connected to the aft or bottom section of Dragon, where the heat shield is located. In order to expose the heat shield and get the vehicle ready for atmospheric re-entry, we will jettison the trunk. From there, the spacecraft will use its forward thrusters to perform a deorbit burn, which will put Dragon on a trajectory to return to Earth. That deorbit burn uses Draco thrusters on Dragon, primarily the four located on the forward bulkhead, and is executed at the apogee or the highest point of Dragon's current orbit around Earth. This deorbit burn will alter Dragon's path to ultimately line it up to re-enter Earth's atmosphere and splash down off the coast of San Diego.
For these operations, the United States Coast Guard, in coordination with SpaceX and NASA, establishes a safety zone to ensure public safety and for the safety of those involved in the recovery operations.
Dragon SpaceX, the team has pulled go for deorbit entry and landing.
Dragon copies. Go for deorbit entry and landing.
Great news there from SpaceX Core to our commander, Zena Cardman. Now, back to the recovery at hand. There are multiple notices that are issued to mariners in advance around the area and during recovery operations, and Coast Guard assets may be deployed to discourage boaters from entering the splashdown zone. Now, we want to stress to the public the need to respect this safety zone, as recovering a spacecraft from the water is a hazardous operation. Any other boats interfering increases risk to the astronauts in the spacecraft, the teams working to recover them from the water, and the safety of those that come too close. So for the safety of the crew and your own safety, we recommend that you sit back and watch on NASA TV and the SpaceX webcast, and we'll be bringing you the best possible views of our astronauts' homecoming.
Now, once the crew returns to Earth, they will be flown to a local hospital for continued monitoring and checkouts using additional medical equipment not available aboard the space station. As NASA's Chief Health and Medical Officer J.D. Polk discussed last week, the crew member is stable and we were able to monitor their condition in orbit, but we want to take advantage of resources on Earth to provide the best care possible. NASA maintains relationships with local hospitals to ensure readiness for any post-landing needs, and for this return, we are utilizing that option as part of our normal preparedness process. Let's take a minute to meet our returning crew. NASA astronaut Zena Cardman is completing her first spaceflight. She holds a Master of Science in Marine Sciences from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and has experience with NASA research in the Canadian High Arctic. She has also supported real-time station operations and lunar surface exploration planning. Next up is NASA astronaut Mike Fink, who is now a veteran of 4 spaceflights. He has spent 549 days in space, and that includes 9 spacewalks that total 48 hours and 37 minutes spent outside the orbiting lab. Fink is a certified pilot for Boeing Starliner and SpaceX's Dragon, and a co-pilot and flight engineer on Soyuz, plus a mission specialist on the Space Shuttle.
Exploration Agency, or JAXA astronaut Kimiya Yui is completing his second trip to the space station. He was selected as an astronaut by JAXA in 2009 and recently hit a milestone of 300 days in space. Rounding out the crew is Roscosmos cosmonaut Oleg Platonov, who was selected as a cosmonaut in 2018 and is completing his first spaceflight.
With the Crew-11 departure yesterday, we still have 3 people living and working aboard the International Space Station. That's the crew that arrived on Soyuz MS-28 and consists of NASA's Chris Williams and Roscosmos cosmonauts Sergei Kudzverchkov and Sergei Mikheyev. This Soyuz crew is slated to remain on the station until returning to Earth this summer. Ahead of the Crew-11 departure from the International Space Station, NASA astronaut Mike Fink handed command of Expedition 74 aboard the orbital complex to Roscosmos cosmonaut Sergei Kudzverchkov. Crew-12 is currently scheduled to launch as soon as mid-February, and alongside our international and commercial partners, NASA is always evaluating the timeline to include other launch opportunities, and we'll provide more information when that's available.
As we mentioned earlier, we have a few final steps that Dragon will perform prior to atmospheric reentry. The slew or the maneuver to deorbit burn attitude and then the deorbit burn itself. This deorbit burn is the last time that the forward Dracos, which are the 4 thrusters located on top of the spacecraft, just under the nose cone section, it's the last time that they will ignite for this mission. The deorbit burn will place Dragon on a precise trajectory to return to the splashdown zone. As I mentioned earlier, that is off the coast of San Diego. We expect this burn to commence around 11:51 p.m. Pacific time. It will last about 13 and a half minutes or so. And this is essentially the transition point that Dragon undergoes while it moves from Earth orbit to reentry, atmospheric reentry. So it is the final moment in which we are essentially programming Dragon to fly itself back for its precise landing off the coast of San Diego. So the view that you saw there moments ago, that was SpaceX Mission Control that's located here in Hawthorne, California, just off to my side. That is where our teams monitor Dragon, checking in on all of its systems to help make sure that the crew has a safe journey. Our team there in Mission Control will be following their progress all along the way. You can see operators there on console or on headset, and there are 6 key positions who are monitoring the health of the vehicle and the crew. The mission director, responsible for mission success, is in charge of the room. And then there's somebody that you've already heard once this morning. That person you'll hear talking to the astronauts throughout our operations today. You see them there on your screen. That is our SpaceX Core, which stands for Crew Operations and Resources Engineer. That is the singular voice to the crew. That person is responsible for translating everything that's going on in mission control around them and speaking and delivering those messages efficiently to the crew on board Dragon. Now, the other positions are focused on specific things like vehicle systems and navigation and control, avionics, software, propulsion, life support, and communications with ground segments. And as I mentioned earlier, there will be a number of opportunities for us to hear from the SpaceX Core. That is the person primarily responsible for communicating to our commander, Xena, and so she will be the person communicating back and forth with our crew here on the ground.
Mission Control Houston, on the right side of your screen, is staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Currently, in the center of your screen, you see Michael Ellsworth. He is serving as the Capcom. He is very similar to the core, like you have in Mission Control at SpaceX, dedicated to talk to the crew members to streamline the communication, and that keeps the astronauts from needing multiple conversations on different subjects. Again, that stands for Capsule Communicator, but he is not talking with the Dragon spacecraft. This Capcom is speaking with the astronauts living aboard the International Space Station. Capcom sits right next to the flight director, and tonight we have Allison Bollinger on console. The flight director gathers info and data from all flight controllers. There you see Allison in the screen. She leads the team through major milestones and approves or declines suggestions based on pre-established flight rules. We have other key members in the room, like ADCO, who controls the attitude or the orientation of the space station. We also have the VVO, which is the visiting vehicle officer, who monitors and works with external teams sending spacecraft to and from the space station. Of course, we have a flight surgeon who the astronauts get a chance to speak with on a regular schedule on a private conference line. We also have Robo, who works with the Canadarm2 and maneuvers it to complete work outside the space station. When astronauts are on a spacewalk, the Canadarm2 is maneuvered by an astronaut within the station. There are plenty other positions, as you can see, and team members who monitor the station's solar arrays, the astronauts' schedules, and even where every piece of equipment and cargo is stored, because it takes a tough and competent team to make a mission successful. As they're on their way home, let's take a look at the Crew-11 mission patch. This patch was designed by the crew, and its colors celebrate the 3 nations they represent. And the 3 stars honor their space agencies working together. 2 sunbeams form the number 11, shining on a tiny blue dot, which is our home on Earth. A dragon looks on, which is a nod to both the spacecraft and the spirit of exploration, while a red flame wraps around it all, symbolizing the full journey: launch, life in space, and today, a safe return home. And if you look closely, you'll see a tribute to their children in the stars, which is a reminder that missions like this inspire the next generation. If you're just joining us, thank you for watching. You are tuned into the live coverage of NASA's SpaceX Crew-11 mission and their return to Earth. Again, we are expecting their splashdown at approximately 3:41 a.m. Eastern Time, but the next major milestone we're standing by for is the deorbit burn. That's at 2:51 a.m. Eastern Time.
Now, before they begin their atmospheric re-entry, let's take a moment to get to know the crew that we're bringing home. NASA astronaut Zena Cardman is commanding Crew-11. She was born in Urbana, Illinois, but calls Williamsburg, Virginia, her hometown. She's a scientist at heart, with degrees in biology and marine science from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Before joining NASA, Zena did field work in some of the most extreme environments on Earth, including Antarctica, the Canadian high Arctic, and volcanic terrain in Idaho and Hawaii. She was selected as part of NASA's 2017 astronaut class, affectionately known as the Turtles. Zena was originally assigned to Crew-9, but was later reassigned to command Crew-11 to support changes in station operations. And when she's not training for spaceflight, she enjoys rock climbing, writing poetry, and powerlifting.
Next up is your Crew-11 pilot, NASA astronaut Michael Fink. He's a Pennsylvania native and a veteran of 3 previous space flights, spending more than a year of his life in orbit. He first flew to space in 2004 as a flight engineer on Expedition 9, then returned in 2009 to command Expedition 18, where he helped prepare the station for future 6-person crews. In 2011, he took part in the final flight of Space Shuttle Endeavour, STS-134, logging 3 more spacewalks along the way. Fink has also been a key player in NASA's commercial crew efforts, supporting development of the Boeing Starliner. He served as a backup pilot for the crew flight test, helping shape Starliner's avionics and software from the ground up, and he co-hosted a launch broadcast. Outside of spaceflight, he's a passionate learner into geology, astronomy, reading, and languages. He's conversational in both Japanese and Russian, which is a skill that comes in handy on the International Space Station.
And your Mission Specialist 1 for Crew-11 is Kimiya Yui, representing the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, or JAXA. A former test pilot and Air Force officer, Yui graduated from Japan's National Defense Academy in 1992 and rose to the rank of lieutenant colonel in the Japanese Air Self-Defense Force. He was selected as a JAXA astronaut in 2009 and made his first trip to space in 2015, spending 142 days aboard the International Space Station as part of Expeditions 44 and 45. During that mission, he made history as the first Japanese astronaut to capture JAXA's H-2 transfer vehicle, a crucial piece of cargo hardware. He also helped build out a new experimental module inside Kibo, Japan's laboratory on station, and carried out
Dragon SpaceX, 5 minutes to deorbit sequence start.
Dragon copy.
All right, that was SpaceX Core, just letting the crew know that we're about 5 minutes away from the initiation of that 13-minute deorbit burn. Now, back to Kimiya Yui. He carried out experiments, 21 experiments, in fact, on behalf of JAXA while on board station. In 2016, Yui was named chief of JAXA's astronaut group, and today he's on his way back to space, or excuse me, is on his way back from space.
And rounding out the crew, we have mission specialist Oleg Platonov, a cosmonaut from Roscosmos, Russia's space agency, and a graduate of the Krasnodar Higher Military Aviation School of Pilots, where he earned a degree in engineering and the rank of lieutenant. Platonov completed his cosmonaut training in 2018 and was certified as a test cosmonaut that same year. His flight to the International Space Station was launched last year, continuing our chapter in international collaboration. He's married and has one child, and Crew-11 was his first journey to space. Again, we are standing by for the deorbit burn, which will bring Crew-11 home, again, splashing off the coast of California approximately 1 hour from now. That's 3:41 a.m. Eastern Time. During their time in orbit, Crew-11 celebrated 25 years of continuous human presence aboard the International Space Station. During that time, our unique microgravity laboratory has hosted more than 4,000 experiments from over 5,000 researchers in more than 110 countries, all to help us build the road to the Moon and Mars and understand our universe while helping humanity on Earth. Crew-11 conducted more than 140 unique scientific experiments and technology demonstrations during their stay aboard the orbiting laboratory. Continuing the space station's legacy of groundbreaking science, Crew-11 worked on experiments to understand bone loss and studied bioprinted human tissues to understand or to ensure the health of astronauts on future missions and improve the quality of life for patients on Earth. They worked on the development of long-term storage of cryogenic fluids in space with Earth-bound medical and industrial applications. The team also tested an inflatable capture bag that aims to remove space debris from orbit, protecting future spacecraft and crews, and could also be used to capture samples during exploration missions and enable mining of small asteroids.
Let's dive into some of these experiments and investigations. The MABEL-B study investigates how microgravity affects bone marrow stem cells and their secretion of proteins involved in bone formation and loss. Researchers aim to determine whether blocking a bone loss pathway could help prevent that bone loss. Findings may lead to new strategies for combating bone loss both in space and on Earth. MVP Cell 07 studies how bioprinted liver tissue with blood vessels matures in microgravity, focusing on cell behavior and tissue development. Researchers are examining how space may affect the structure and function of these engineered tissues. Results could help advance space-based production of high-quality tissues and organs for medical use on Earth and support astronaut health on future missions. Capture Bag Demo tests an inflatable debris capture bag on the space station, assessing its opening, closing, and ability to stay airtight in microgravity. This technology could be used to remove space debris from orbit, protecting future spacecraft and crew members, and could also be used to capture samples during exploration missions to the Moon and Mars and enable mining of small asteroids.
Next up is ZBOT-NC. Many spacecraft use cryogenic fuels, which are extremely cold, for propulsion. These fuels must be kept extremely cold to stay liquid, but SpaceX's temperature fluctuations can cause them to slowly evaporate and escape the tank. This creates fuel efficiency and mission planning. So ZBOT-NC investigates how specific types of gases affect pressure control in propellant tanks in space. The data collected will help validate models and contribute to the design of more efficient cryogenic fuel storage systems for long-duration missions. Rounding out this list, Bionutrients 3 aims to develop an on-demand method for producing essential nutrients in space using bioengineered yeast, helping maintain crew health on long-duration missions while reducing launch mass. Building on previous studies, it introduces advanced food safety features and tests 3 sample types: yogurt, kefir, and a yeast-based beverage. The project aims to identify a food-safe, genetically engineered organism that remains viable over multiple years to produce a mission-relevant nutrient or biomolecule of interest.
If you've just recently tuned in, we are standing by for the call out of the initiation of our deorbit burn. We're expecting that to begin at 11:51 p.m. Pacific time. This is a 13.5-minute long burn that positions Dragon for its atmospheric reentry and splashdown off the coast of San Diego. So like I mentioned, we are standing by. That should be coming here in just a couple of minutes as we expect that to initiate at 11:51 p.m. Pacific time.
As we await that deorbit burn, which we expect to commence momentarily, just a look at some of the Crew-11 statistics. Their mission will last 167 days by the time they splash down, with 165 days spent on the space station. That means they traveled 2,672 orbits of Earth, which is over 70,856,752 statute miles. We're hearing about 30 seconds until that deorbit burns start. During their time in space, this crew saw a total of 5 arriving vehicles and the departure of 3 vehicles. And right on time, at 2:51 a.m. Eastern Time, we have confirmation that the deorbit burn has begun. This burn is expected to last over 13 minutes. For these return and splashdown operations, the United States Coast Guard, in coordination with SpaceX and NASA, establishes a safety zone to ensure public safety and for the safety of those involved in the recovery operations, as well as the crew aboard the returning spacecraft. Multiple notices are issued to mariners in advance and during recovery operations, and Coast Guard assets may be deployed to discourage boaters from entering the splashdown zones. We want to again stress to all of the public the need to respect this safety zone. Recovering a spacecraft from the water is a hazardous operation, and any other boats interfering increases risk to the astronauts in the capsule, the teams working to recover them from the water, and the safety of those that come too close. Now, for the safety of the crew and your own safety, we would love for you to continue joining us on NASA Plus and the SpaceX webcast, because you're going to get the best views of our astronauts on their journey home.
Like Leah said, the best views will be coming to you here on our webcast. However, if you are in the Los Angeles area, the San Diego area there in Southern California, I do encourage you to step outside about 12:30 a.m. as you might be able to see the spacecraft actually re-entering on its way there back to the splashdown site. And if you're lucky, you might even hear a sonic boom. Now, as always, NASA and SpaceX jointly select our splashdown location, and for today, the primary recovery site is there off of the coast of San Diego. The selection process works with a lot of different variables, including the space station's orbital trajectory, what landing sites are available and have favorable weather, how much free flight capability that Dragon has for the trip home, and of course, the sleep schedule for the returning crew members. We'll start with calculating daily return options based off of the space station's current orbit and Dragon's capabilities to maneuver and line up for re-entry. The time from undock to landing at the primary site can vary from less than 6 hours to more than 39. For Crew-11 this evening, their journey is going to be about 10.5 hours in total. Of course, getting home the quickest comes with some obvious benefits, but we always have to make sure that the crew is properly rested for all these dynamic operations. And of course, that would prevent us from scheduling 20-plus hour days for them. Trajectory and ballistics experts provide the daily opportunities that would line up with the Dragon as it's coming back to the landing zones. And then we split them into what we call ascending and descending opportunities. Okay, so we still have a few minutes left to go here in this deorbit burn. As I mentioned before, this is the transition of the Dragon spacecraft from Earth orbit to atmospheric reentry. This is lining the spacecraft up for its precise splashdown location there off the coast of San Diego. So in a couple minutes, in fact, we expect this deorbit burn to conclude at 12:04 a.m. Pacific time. So we will stand by and await to hear the call for nominal burn. When we hear that, that will confirm completion of this deorbit burn for Dragon Endeavour. As I mentioned earlier, we will hear primarily the SpaceX core or the crew operations and resource engineer. That is the primary role in mission control that is responsible for communicating with the Crew-11 spacecraft. That individual is seated there on the left-hand side of your screen. That is SpaceX Hawthorne Mission Control. Also seated there, I believe I see my boss, SpaceX Vice President Bill Gerstenmaier, sitting there in the front row. This group of operators are standing by and monitoring Dragon's progress throughout this burn. Now, this particular maneuver that Dragon Endeavour is performing, this deorbit burn, is utilizing the 4 forward Draco thrusters. We say forward because that indicates that it's basically the language indicating that they're located at the top of the Dragon spacecraft. These 4 Draco thrusters, this is the last time that they will be utilized for this mission. This deorbit burn will last for a total of about 13.5 minutes. Okay, we still got about 6 minutes left in this deorbit burn. As we wait for a conclusion of the deorbit burn, let's talk about Dragon Endeavour's journey from the space station so far. Shortly after its separation, Dragon used its Draco thrusters to move away from the station in a series of carefully choreographed maneuvers, or departure burns, and those were done to increase the distance between the spacecraft and the space station. Dragon also executed a phasing burn to lower its orbit and line the spacecraft up with its landing location. Following the phasing burns, Dragon is now completing its deorbit, which will be followed by reentry and splashdown. During the deorbit sequence, several things will happen, including trunk separation, closure of the nose cone, as well as deployment of the drogue and main parachutes, ultimately followed by splashdown.
Again, if you're just joining us, this is the live coverage of NASA's SpaceX Crew-11 mission return to Earth. We are currently in the deorbit burn, which started at 1:51 a.m. Central Time, 2:51 a.m. Eastern Time. It's expected to last approximately 13 minutes, so we still have about 4 more minutes left of this burn. Once it's complete, Dragon will then proceed to jettison the trunk before it re-enters the Earth's atmosphere, exposing the heat shield on the base of the spacecraft and protecting the crew as they make their way toward the splashdown location. And we are anticipating splashdown at 3:41 a.m. Eastern, 2:41 a.m. Central Time off the coast of California.
All right, we have just over a minute remaining in this 13.5-minute burn. This is the deorbit burn. This is the final burn for the forward Draco thrusters. It is placing Dragon on its final trajectory to the splashdown location off the coast of California. We're targeting one of our 3 pre-designated locations. This one will be just off the coast of San Diego. Shortly after the burn concludes, we should hear a call out indicating that the burn was nominal. This would be good news and letting us know that we are continuing with progression of our milestones. After deorbit burn, we will jettison the trunk and have atmospheric reentry. All right, so there's about 10 seconds left in this burn, so we're going to stand by and listen for that call out.
Dragon SpaceX, deorbit burn complete. Performance nominal. Trunk separation initiated.
Dragon copies. Nominal deorbit burn. Trunk separation process initiated.
Okay, good words there from SpaceX Core, letting our Crew-11 team know that the deorbit burn was as expected. Now, to prepare for these upcoming events, Dragon is currently doing a couple of things autonomously, such as isolating the thermal control system fluid loops from the radiator. This system is what will help keep the internal temperature of Dragon comfortable during the crew's reentry. Dragon is also initiating separation of the claw mechanism, which will terminate all data, power, and fluid connections between the spacecraft and the trunk, and that is all done in preparation for trunk separation.
Nominal trunk jettison.
Dragon copies.
All right, great news there. We heard the call out for successful trunk separation. So that means that telemetry is looking good. The nitrox system is primed for cabin and suit cooling, and the heat shield is exposed and ready for atmospheric entry. Now, since we separated the trunk, we are no longer able to generate any new power, but we don't need to since we're coming on home and Dragon has more than enough battery power already stored. So the next milestone that we have coming up is nose cone closure. We expect that at approximately 12:09 a.m., so here in about 3 minutes. The nose cone is at the top of the spacecraft, and it is the structure that protects the docking system as well as the guidance, navigation, and control system. We'll be using 12 hooks to lock and secure the nose cone prior to its atmospheric entry.
That's right, we are standing by for nose cone closure, expected just a few minutes from now. And as you can tell, things are picking up a little bit more quickly as we prepare for splashdown. Again, expecting that to come at 2:41 a.m. Central Time, 3:41 a.m. Eastern. So right now, Dragon is inhibiting those forward bulkhead Draco thrusters. We just used those to complete the deorbit burn, meaning they will not fire again, and ensuring it's safe to latch the nose cone for re-entry. The vehicle has, we are also anticipating it to initiate the nitrox suit purge. This helps keep our crew members, Zena Cardman, Mike Fink, Kim Yayui, and Oleg Platonov, cool and comfortable during re-entry, which we're expecting in about 20 minutes. At this point, the nose cone, we are standing by for that closure to begin, protecting that forward hatch for re-entry. And the crew will be able to use their screens to monitor the locking of the nose cone, which is done by that set of hooks. Underneath the nose cone is also the hatch that the crew members use to ingress and egress, also known as enter and exit, the International Space Station while the spacecraft was docked. Now, once they splash down, they'll be using the side hatch to exit the spacecraft and onto the recovery ship. That side hatch is what they used to enter Dragon back in August when they launched to the space station.
For those of you that have just recently joined us, For Crew-11 Splashdown, we have completed the deorbit burn that set Dragon on its precise trajectory back to our splashdown location off the coast of San Diego, California. We've also jettisoned the trunk, and we've just closed the nose cone. So these are the final physical changes for the Dragon spacecraft prior to its atmospheric entry. And we expect that entry period to begin about 12:30 a.m. Pacific time, so in about 20 minutes or so. We also expect the crew to receive their final entry briefing. This is where the SpaceX core will communicate any changed details, such as timeline shifts to the anticipated loss of signal and acquisition of signal, as well as the entry period. We should also find out what the wave height and wind speed is there at the splashdown location. But when I was coming into work this evening, I did see some stars outside, so hopefully that's a good indication that we've got some smooth seas out there awaiting the crew.
As we are in the process of the hooks and latches driving to secure and close the nose cone, just a recap of what we've seen so far tonight. The spacecraft undocked from the International Space Station earlier today. This Crew-11, spent 165 days aboard the orbiting laboratory, but 167 days in space altogether, if you count the time they have spent getting to and from the space station. At 1:51 a.m. Central Time, 2:51 a.m. Eastern, the spacecraft executed the deorbit burn. That was an approximately 13-minute-long burn, committing the spacecraft to coming home and splashing down off the coast of California. We're anticipating that splashdown in less than 30 minutes from now, 2:41 a.m. Central. After the nose cone closes, we will begin seeing our reentry process, and part of that is a communications blackout. We lose communication with the spacecraft. This is an anticipated and tracked milestone as they go through reentry and plasma builds up around the spacecraft itself. We do regain that communications shortly thereafter, and following that, we anticipate seeing drogue parachutes deployed. There are 2 of those, as well as 4 main parachutes, slowing down the spacecraft to a splashdown time of, again, 2:41 a.m. Central Time. So we're just standing by for confirmation of nose cone closure.
Dragon SpaceX, nose cone secured for entry.
Dragon.
Okay, we heard good news there. The nose cone is closed and secured, locked in position, ready for atmospheric reentry. Now, as we begin the second half of entry, Dragon has begun to inject cooled nitrox or nitrogen-oxygen mixture into the air, being delivered directly into the suits worn by the crew. Again, this is what will allow our crew members to remain comfortable while external temperatures reach up to 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit. Meanwhile, the heat shield is pointing forward, essentially leading Dragon to our landing site just off the coast of San Diego, which is important as it will be doing a lot of the work during this reentry. So let's talk a bit more about the heat shield. Dragon's primary heat shield is comprised of PICA 3.0, which stands for Phenolic Impregnated Carbon Ablator. Now, the first gen PICA was actually initially developed by NASA for studying and sampling comets within our solar system. SpaceX partnered with NASA to develop PICA X, which was the second gen product.
Dragon SpaceX for entry briefing. Report when ready to copy.
Ready to copy.
Okay, starting with timeline. We're completely on time for the previously briefed timeline. Splashdown per your displays at 0841 Zulu. COM blackout start 0828. Blackout end 0835. How copy?
Copy, we are on time for 0841 splashdown per the timeline. COM blackout start 0828, COM blackout end 0835.
That's a good readback. We have a nominal vehicle status. We're tracking an on-target arrival to San Diego with pristine weather conditions for splashdown. Recovery team is on site and ready to support.
Dragon copies, nominal vehicle, excellent weather, and teams are ready to support.
And with that, please report when tablets are secure, restraints are tightened, and visors are down.
SpaceX Dragon, tablets secure, restraints tightened, and visors down.
SpaceX copies all.
All right, so as expected, that was our entry brief to the crew, letting them know that there were actually no updates to the anticipated timeline this morning. So that's great news. Everything is looking well on timed with our anticipated timeline. So as we mentioned before, we expect our anticipated loss of signal to occur around 12:28 a.m. Pacific. So in just about 8 minutes from now, we will have, we anticipate that signal to be regained or anticipate that signal to be acquired again at 12:35 a.m. Pacific time. Now, sometimes we are able to hail the crew a little bit earlier than that, and sometimes we get those communications back. And then once again, splashdown at 12:41 a.m. Pacific. So again, if you're in Southern California, head outside and look up. Now, let's get back to talking a little bit about the heat shield. As you know, we're talking about this signal loss, and that's due to part of what's going on with that heat shield. So SpaceX partnered with NASA to develop the second generation heat shield product, and that was actually used on all of the Dragon 1 CRS missions that resupplied the space station on 20 missions. Then fast forwarding to PICA 3.0, that was developed specifically for use on Dragon 2 crew and cargo with enhanced structural and thermal thermal properties that optimized the heat shield and drove down cost and mass. So the remainder of Dragon is composed primarily of a SpaceX proprietary ablative material. That's another class of thermal protection, which is lighter weight versus Pika and protects the underlying composite structure during the reentry phase, and that's to ensure the structural capabilities of the spacecraft are maintained. Now, while Dragon will experience temperatures over 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit peak during those peak reentry conditions, the characteristics of the thermal protection systems, or TPS as you hear it called, coupled with the environmental control and life support, or ECLIS, that system pressurized will be pressurizing the interior, and all those combined will ensure that the crew will stay cool and comfortable during all phases of reentry through splashdown.
SpaceX Dragon,
okay, so
opening seat 3 visor just to adjust glasses.
Dragon SpaceX, can you repeat?
Temporarily opening seat 3 visor to adjust glasses.
Copy, adjusting glasses. Your go for that.
Okay, so that was important to note there because our commander, Zena Cardman, had already reported back that all visors were down and in the locked position ready for atmospheric reentry, but one of our crew members had to adjust their glasses. So she did a good job there in reporting back to SpaceX Crew to let them know that one of the crew members had to reopen momentarily.
Visors are down.
We copy, visors are down. 5 minutes until predicted calm blackout. See you on the other side at 0835.
Copy 0835. Talk to you soon.
Okay, so as we have been saying, everything that Dragon and the crew on board does is carefully choreographed, not just the maneuvers that the spacecraft is executing, but the communications between our crew here on the ground and our crew in space. So, Leah, we can see all of that being perfectly demonstrated with what's going on now.
Absolutely, and we are standing by for the reentry portion when we expect to lose communications with the spacecraft, but we will regain that communication after they have begun re-entering the atmosphere. So once Dragon has re-entered the Earth's atmosphere, a series of parachutes will deploy to slow the crew's descent. First will be the 2 drogue chutes, followed by the 4 main chutes to guide Dragon to its first contact with Earth since launching in August. Dragon will automatically deploy these parachutes when different pressure and positioning sensors on the spacecraft detect that they are at the right speed and altitude. The spacecraft velocity at drogue deploy is approximately 350 miles per hour, and they deploy at about 18,000 feet. You're getting a live look inside the cabin right now. That's Crew-11 preparing for their re-entry period. Again, having spent 165 days aboard the space station, and when they splash down, capping a 167-day mission. Before they can splash down, though, a little bit more about those parachutes. The next that we will see deploy will be the main parachutes. There are 4 of those. They deploy at approximately 119 miles per hour, or I should say when the spacecraft is traveling about 119 miles per hour, and they deploy at about 65,000 feet. And at Splashdown, Dragon is traveling approximately 16 miles per hour, which is a pretty good deceleration from the about 17,500 miles per hour that they were traveling while in Earth orbit with the International Space Station. Now, the highest G load the crew will experience during re-entry is approximately 3 to 5 Gs, so about 3 to 5 times what we are experiencing right now standing on Earth. This view is over the shoulder of Commander Zena Cardman and pilot Mike Fink of the Crew-11 spacecraft. In this view, you can see their crew displays. They're able to monitor everything happening with the spacecraft. However, all the next milestones should be completely autonomous and hands-off for the crew. And we just heard that the crew is in entry attitude, and we are anticipating losing this view and losing our audio communications with the crew in just a minute or so as they enter this entry interface. They'll be traveling and experiencing heat outside the capsule at approximately 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit. And as they are traveling and re-entering Earth's atmosphere, a plasma builds up around the capsule that prevents us from communicating back and forth with the crew. We expect to regain communications with them about 7 minutes later, but we're still getting great views right now.
I love this view over their shoulders because you can see what our pilot and commander can see. They're continuing to follow along with Dragon's progress. As Leah mentioned, we have designed the spacecraft to be completely autonomous. Dragon is flying itself, so they are able to monitor along with everything that's going on. I also want to momentarily point out on the bottom of your screen there, you have some graphical interfaces there that represent the speed and the altitude. And it looks like we've lost our views there as that, we are now entering the period of anticipated loss of signal. This is where, as Leah mentioned, the plasma is beginning to build up on the exterior of the capsule as we expect. This happens with every spacecraft reentry for Dragon, and so this lasts just a few minutes. But I want to momentarily note that there on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, you can actually see something pretty cool where when one of the Draco thrusters ignite to fire and help steer the spacecraft, you will actually see that they're represented on the interface there. Now, the four in the middle, those are representing the four forward Draco thrusters. We won't see those ignite at all because those were last utilized in the 13-minute deorbit burn that we completed earlier. Those are located under the nose cone, which has been closed, locked, and secured. So everything that you'll be seeing are the thrusters that are located on the side of our spacecraft, and that is enabling Dragon to fly itself home to its predetermined splashdown site off the coast of San Diego, California. For about a minute and a half until we have that atmospheric reentry. Once again, if you're in Southern California, head on outside and look up. There's a good chance that you might be able to actually see Dragon streak across the sky, look toward about the north and the west. As we mentioned before, we have entered a communications blackout period, which lasts about 7 minutes due to the plasma formation on the exterior of the capsule. We've got about 5 minutes remaining until we believe we can acquire that signal again. Now, during this time, no vehicle telemetry is received by Mission Control or the recovery team, and no external commanding of the vehicle or voice communication is possible. But like I was saying, Dragon is designed to fly itself. During this reentry, the vehicle will be slowing down from its orbital velocity of about 17,500 miles per hour. And it's slowing down. The atmosphere is really doing a lot of the work in conjunction with that heat shield to dispel that velocity. That results in heat, and that is why we have this plasma building up on the exterior of the spacecraft. It'll slow down to about 350 miles per hour, thanks to thanks to the heat shield and the atmosphere. And so at that point, we'll deploy the drogue parachutes. But during reentry, the top temperature that Dragon experiences will be about 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit. So pretty warm on the outside, but there is cool nitrox air being flowed through the suits that each crew member is wearing. So we ensure that they remain comfortable during this brief journey through the atmosphere.
Now, while we await AOS, or acquisition of signal, let's go through a brief recap of today's events. Hatch closure took place at 2:29 p.m. Central Time after all 4 crew members floated into Dragon for their ride home. They took time to configure the spacecraft cabin, put on their suits, and get seated ahead of undocking, which occurred at 4:20 p.m. Central. Dragon's departure burns helped move it out of the keep-out sphere and approach ellipsoid, which are both invisible boundaries we monitor around the space station. Since then, we completed the deorbit burn at 1:51. Oh, and you're getting your first views of re-entry. This is live, and if you're in California, you can go see this with your own eyes. This is Crew-11 re-entering after 167 days in space. Again, we are in a loss of signal period. This is a tracked period as the spacecraft re-enters Earth's atmosphere. We anticipate regaining signal with Crew-11 momentarily, and when the spacecraft reaches an altitude of 18,000 feet above Earth, 2 drogue chutes will deploy to slow it down ahead of the 4 main parachutes deploying at 6,000 feet in altitude. Now, splashdown will be the milestone we will see after that, which is expected for 2:41 a.m. Central Time. So again, we're standing by for acquisition of signal and continued communication with Crew-11, expecting that just a few minutes from now.
Dragon SpaceX, comm check.
SpaceX Dragon, loud and clear.
We have you the same, loud and clear. Expect automated chute deployment.
Copy, automated chute deploy expected.
All right, so there we heard that we had confirmation of that acquisition of signal, or AOS. It actually came in a minute early, so that's good news there. We heard the Corps inform the crew to expect drogue parachute deployment that happens when Dragon senses the right speed and altitude. So that's roughly about 350 miles per hour and around 18,000 feet in altitude. There we have a view from...
GPS converged. Expect nominal altitude for drogue chute deploy.
Dragon copies, expecting nominal altitude.
So we'll have that drogue deploy in about a minute from now, but we have our first views from the WB-57. This is a high-altitude tracking plane that is providing these thermal signatures via infrared. This is really cool to see here as we continue to track Dragon on its way back to planet Earth. So momentarily, we expect for visual and...
brace for drogue window.
Drogue brace.
Dragon has safed the propulsion system as we anticipate drogue deployment any moment now. Drogue parachutes are utilized to stabilize and decelerate the vehicle further prior to deployment of the main parachutes. Drogue should be deploying here in a couple seconds, and mains will follow in about 1 minute. There we have visual confirmation of drogue deploy.
Visual, 2 healthy drogues.
Kind of a cool
Dragon
shot.
copies.
I think we had the recovery vessel in the background there just momentarily. Main parachutes deploying in about 20 seconds. The main parachutes deploy when the vehicle's about 119 miles per hour and around 6,000 feet. There we can see visual confirmation of deployment of the 4
Visual,
mains.
4 healthy mains.
These main parachutes help decelerate the spacecraft even further. So they deploy around 119 miles per hour, and they'll decelerate it down to about 15, 16 miles per hour, and that will be the speed in which the spacecraft is traveling upon splashdown. Once again, we're anticipating splashdown at 12:41 a.m.
Meters.
Copy, 1,000.
We'll now begin to hear Crew-11 Commander Zena Cardman call out the altitude from her seat there in Dragon Endeavour. SpaceX's mission control team in Hawthorne continues to report the precise landing coordinates to the recovery team.
Copy, 800.
Those main parachutes now fully reefed or inflated. We ensure that the parachutes inflate over a few seconds to help reduce the shock to the system.
600 meters.
Copy, 600.
All around great views of Dragon Endeavour as it continues its way back to Earth.
Copy, 400. Crew are braced.
Standing by for splashdown. Splashdown of Crew-11. After 167 days in space, Dragon and NASA astronauts Zena Cardman and Mike Fink, Kimya Yui of JAXA, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Oleg Platonov are back on Earth.
Dragon, SpaceX, we see splashdown.
SpaceX Dragon, copy, concur. Splashdown and mains are cut. We are in 4.800.
SpaceX copies, and we see the same. Mains cut. On behalf of SpaceX and NASA, welcome home, Crew-11.
SpaceX Dragon, it's so good to be home. With deep gratitude to the teams who got us there and back.
Vehicle safety verifications in progress. We'll report back when recovery personnel are en route.
Dragon copies.
Again, we have Splashdown of NASA's SpaceX Crew-11 mission, a 167-day mission, 165 of those being spent on board the International Space Station, now splashing down off the coast of California. That splashdown coming right on time at 2:41 a.m. Central Time. The SpaceX recovery ship and team has been waiting for Dragon splashdown, and they will now begin making their way to the splashdown location. It looks like we even have a couple of visitors around the spacecraft. If you look very closely, you might even see some dolphins. Again, a return by the books for Crew-11, having splashed down at 2:41 a.m. Central Time off the coast of California. We will now begin moving into the recovery process. We'll see the boats begin to approach and inspect the spacecraft by checking for hypergol and other ordnance checks. They will begin to rig the spacecraft and prepare it to be lifted on that recovery ship. And this is a great view of some of those boats that go out and check the spacecraft. They are going to be sniffing it, essentially, for these hazardous fuels that can linger once the spacecraft has re-entered Earth's atmosphere.
SpaceX Dragon, 4.800, Section 3. We are in Stable 1.
SpaceX copies. Stable 1.
That's the voice of NASA astronaut and commander of Crew-11, Zena Cardman, reporting back that they are working through their procedures and that the capsule is in Stable 1, which is the position that you see on your screen here, where it is upright in the water. This is just what we were hoping for, and again, it's been a completely nominal and by-the-books return for the crew today. This is a live view of Crew-11 aboard Dragon from the SpaceX recovery vehicle, or from their SpaceX recovery ship. And this day for the crew started about 10.5 hours ago when they undocked from the International Space Station. SpaceX
Dragon,
recovery
SpaceX.
teams have been given the go to
SpaceX
approach.
is go for recovery personnel to approach. Expect personnel alongside in 1 minute.
Copy, 1 minute. Thank you.
And you just heard that call out from the Corps in Hawthorne, California, to the crew aboard Dragon that the SpaceX personnel who have been in the general vicinity of Dragon's anticipated splashdown location now have the go to approach the spacecraft and begin that recovery process.
All right, so as we heard, we are now standing by for recovery of the Dragon Endeavour spacecraft with NASA astronaut Zena Cardman and Mike Fink, Kimia Yui of JAXA, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Oleg Platonov, who are inside that spacecraft that you see there. Now, Dragon has already, I would also like to point out, we've got some folks here are approaching the spacecraft now that they have gotten the okay for the approach. They're on some fast boats there. This is the SpaceX recovery team. Personally, one of my favorite teams to work with here at SpaceX. They're a really scrappy crew, and they're going to work really quickly here to get the Crew-11 team out of the water. And it's always a lot of fun to watch these operations proceed. Now, Dragon has already autonomously completed several steps to safe itself following splashdown. For those of you that perhaps just joined us, the return has gone very smoothly so far, as Leah had mentioned. The Dragon successfully splashed down off the coast of San Diego, California at 12:41 a.m. Pacific time, 3:41 a.m. Eastern time. Approximately 10.5 hours prior to splashdown, Dragon autonomously undocked from the International Space Station, completed a series of departure burns, jettisoned its trunk section, and performed its final burn, which was the deorbit burn, and that placed itself on a trajectory toward Southern California, specifically off the coast of San Diego. So Dragon successfully re-entered the Earth's atmosphere, followed by deployment of its parachutes to slow the spacecraft down to a gentle splashdown. So we're now going to follow the final part of the crew's journey as the Dragon spacecraft is lifted out of the water and placed on the recovery boat. So we see here the recovery team beginning to prepare. One of the most important steps will be to
Dragon SpaceX, hypergol sweeps and unfired ordnance checks, nominal. Rigging in progress, approximately 25 minutes until capsule lift. Stand by for PMC. The next call you hear will be from SpaceX flight surgeon on Dragon to Ground Private.
Dragon copies. 25 minutes until lift. Standing by for PMC.
All right, we heard there that the crew will have an opportunity for a private medical conference with the flight surgeon. That is standard for all of our crew returns. That will be done on a private channel. Great view here from the drone. This is our first look at the front side of Dragon Endeavour. I love this view because you can see the lights on the inside. This crew member here is actually on the capsule, beginning to place the rigging required for the lift onto the large recovery vessel. This takes a few minutes to essentially lasso and wrangle the Dragon capsule as it gently bobs there in the water. Not in the picture, there is another fast boat that is recovering the parachutes from the water. Those were automatically cut or released from Dragon upon splashdown, and we retrieved those from the water. This fast boat here is helping to assist the rigging of the required straps and equipment for the spacecraft recovery.
Dragon SpaceX, Dragon to Ground is no longer privatized.
Dragon copies.
SpaceX recovery team continues to maneuver around Dragon Endeavour as we continue progress of placing the recovery straps required in order to safely lift the spacecraft out of the water. Something we heard called out earlier prior to the closest approach that we see now was completion of the safety sweeps. that was just indicating that the recovery team performed the required checks to ensure that there weren't any unfired pyros, which are used to...
Dragon, be advised, transitioning forward link. COM will be unavailable for approximately 5 minutes.
One of
Earlier, prior to atmospheric reentry, we heard SpaceX Core report to the crew during the, excuse me, during the entry brief that recovery conditions were almost pristine, and he was not joking. It seems that the weather, the waves are pretty smooth out there. And Leah mentioned earlier that there are some dolphins out to play as well. Perhaps we might be able to get to see those as the recovery vessel gets a little closer to the spacecraft. On your screen now are our operators at SpaceX Mission Control. They continue to monitor Dragon Endeavour during these recovery operations, as well as communicate directly to the recovery team. Everything is carefully coordinated within our procedures, and here you see folks that are responsible for individual portions to ensure that everything is executed as planned. If you've just recently joined us, we had a perfectly nominal re-entry of Dragon Endeavour. The crew splashed down exactly on time at 12:41 a.m. Pacific time off the coast of San Diego. The recovery team has arrived at the splashdown location and are placing the required straps onto the Dragon spacecraft. The crew are safely inside. Nobody is allowed to pass go just yet. We still have to lift the spacecraft out of the water and onto our recovery vessel.
Dragon SpaceX, forward link transition complete. Com check.
We've got you loud and clear.
We have you the same.
Hopefully we'll be able to bring those views of the recovery team back. But at this point, I can share that one member of the recovery team is still, oh, there we can see our recovery vessel continuing to approach Dragon Endeavour there in its splashdown location. We still have one recovery team member working to apply the rigging to the capsule. You can see that work ongoing there. As we've seen, this involves climbing on top of the spacecraft itself to attach these hoist rings and connect the lifting lines. Overall, the progress tonight has been very smooth and very rapid. Depending on the sea state, it can take us a little bit longer, but things are really smooth this evening, and the recovery team is very efficient. It takes us less than an hour to raise Dragon onto the recovery vessel and remove the crew from the spacecraft. After initial medical checkouts, the crew will return to land within 4 hours by helicopter. So everything continuing to proceed as scheduled and as anticipated. The ring that you see there on the deck of the, excuse me, of the recovery vessel, that is what we refer to as the nest. That is where the Dragon Once lifted out of the water, using the hydraulic lift there at the aft end of the recovery vessel, the Dragon spacecraft will be lifted and placed into that nest, and that nest will then be translated forward on the recovery vessel up to where the egress the egress bay is located. Yeah, so this is a great view there of the recovery team member that is responsible for placing the hoist straps and the rigging required to lift the the Dragon spacecraft out of the water, along with the recovery team members located in the fast boat, helping to provide the necessary light, as this is obviously a nighttime splashdown operation. We've done several of these before. As you can see there, the sea state is super calm, and I'm assuming really nice conditions to be working in right now. Over time, we can see the primary recovery vessel. This is our recovery vessel Shannon, named after, of course, Shannon Walker, who flew on Crew-11. She is the first female astronaut to fly in our Dragon spacecraft. So we have this vessel named after her. And we can see Shannon slowly but surely getting closer and closer to Dragon Endeavour as it patiently waits there in the glass-like water. Once all the required straps and rings are in place and the recovery vessel is in its location and everything is attached, we'll actually see that recovery team member jump off from the capsule and into the water. It's one of my favorite moments of the recovery process. I think we might, yep, there they are. The dolphins are back to play. We now have a better view of them. I'm sure they're very intrigued by all the lights that are in the area here in the middle of the night in Southern California. If you've just recently joined us, you're tuning in at a great time. We're in the final phases of the Crew-11 return to Earth. They had an on-time splashdown at 12:41 a.m. Pacific time, 3:41 a.m. Eastern time. And as you can see, recovery operations are proceeding very well. everything is everything is going according to plan, or as we like to say around here, nominal. And we can see the recovery vessel continues to approach Dragon Endeavour, and the recovery team there on the vessel standing by as we await the hoist of the Dragon spacecraft onto the aft end of the vessel. I can say once we make the final approach here to the Dragon spacecraft, the hoisting actually happens. It always takes me by surprise just how fast it is, because you can't really see the full size of the hydraulic lift or hoist there at the aft end of the recovery vessel, but it's pretty big and pretty strong. So we're able to lift the spacecraft out of the water. We can see there that the lines, the guidelines are attached, and they're going to line everything up here for the final approach and ultimately the lift into the nest there located at the back of the vessel. So we can see Dragon Endeavour, the gap is closing between Dragon Endeavour and our recovery vessel Shannon. Once again, we had an on-time splashdown off the coast of San Diego, California, that occurred at 12:41 a.m. Pacific time. All 4 crew members of Crew-11 are still in our Dragon spacecraft. Moments ago, when the spacecraft was turned the other way, we could actually see
Dragon SpaceX. Rigging complete. Approximately 5 minutes until capsule lift.
Dragon copies. 5 minutes to lift.
All right, good call out there. Just keeping the crew there inside Dragon Endeavour apprised of the timeline. While there are windows, it is a little hard to see exactly everything that's going on outside of those windows at this point, as there is quite a bit of action as we have been following along. We can see now that the hydraulic lift has been extended into the initial lifting position. And this is the mechanism that will bring Dragon out of the water and onto the nest there at the back of the recovery vessel. We'll also see the recovery team member. I think you can still, yeah, you can still see them there on the front. They're actually standing in the bay where the main parachutes are stored. That's quite a large bay. Now they're climbing up to the top, and shortly we'll see them make some final adjustments and a final graceful flying departure from Dragon Endeavour.
Brace for capsule lift.
Crew bracing.
Now, as you can see, the recovery teams are preparing to lower the vessel's hydraulic lift mechanism, and that's going to bring the spacecraft into the on-deck translation system, also known as the nest. Dragon will remain in the nest during crew extraction and then for the journey back to port. Again, all of this coming right after splashdown at 2:41 a.m. Central Time, right on time, and a really expedient recovery, partially thanks to the calm sea states and great weather that is out in the San Diego area right now, but also due to the swift and very well skilled and practiced efforts of the NASA and SpaceX recovery teams. The spacecraft is now being lifted. It'll be set on the nest and centered. It'll be oriented so that the side hatch is facing forward for the crew to egress. It'll be moved into the hangar underneath that helipad that you see illuminated in green on the top of the ship, and then pulled towards the mezzanine area so that the crew can be helped outside of the hatch. Once open, a SpaceX medical doctor will be the first to check in on Cardman. Fink, Yui, and Platonov are Crew-11 crew members, and see if they're ready for egress or exiting the vehicle. This is a standard procedure for all of our crew returns. This view coming from the recovery vessel, as you see Dragon, and at the very bottom, that is the nest in which we were discussing, and that's where Dragon will remain now and all the way back to port. You can also see, facing forward, that is Dragon's side hatch we were discussing. This is the same hatch they used to enter the spacecraft on launch day in August. And of course, this is different from the top hatch. You can not see that because it's underneath the nose cone at the very top of the spacecraft. We've been following along all the way through deorbit burn and nose cone closure tonight. That top hatch underneath the nose cone is what the astronauts and cosmonaut used to enter and exit the International Space Station while Dragon was docked. So before we open this side hatch, the spacecraft's cabin pressure must be equalized with the outside environment. And of course, once that hatch is open, this will be the crew's first breath of fresh air back on Earth since boarding their spacecraft at the start of their journeys back in August. Again, a very by-the-book return for Crew-11 tonight. Everything nominal, as we often use, meaning it's normal and as planned and as expected. Splashdown happening at 2:41 a.m. Central. This swift recovery getting them on the boat. It's now 3:10 a.m. Central.
Dragon SpaceX, welcome aboard the recovery vessel. Recovery personnel are completing their final checks and stand by for translation to the egress platform.
Dragon copies.
Now that voice speaking with the astronauts and cosmonaut on the Dragon spacecraft is still coming from the core in SpaceX Mission Control in Hawthorne, California. These team members are making sure that all thrusters are covered before they begin to maneuver the spacecraft toward that egress platform. We'll be standing by live the entire time. This is the 6th flight of this spacecraft. In all, Endeavour has flown 9 NASA astronauts, 3 visitors to the International Space Station, 2 Roscosmos cosmonauts, 1 retired NASA astronaut, 1 ESA astronaut, and an Emirati astronaut from the UAE to and from the International Space Station. Again, this is the 6th mission for this Dragon spacecraft named Endeavour. First launching on May 30th, 2020 to the International Space Station. And if you remember that date, that was the historic Demo 2 mission for the Commercial Crew Program, carrying NASA astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley. What you're seeing here are SpaceX team members. They are preparing the vehicle to be moved to that egress platform, making sure everything is safe, that the rigging is properly attached. This is really the final ride on Dragon for these Crew-11 crew members. One short trip to this egress platform, and then they'll begin being assisted out of the spacecraft. Completely normal procedures for all of our returns. And this is a live view from Mission Control in Houston, Texas, the International Space Station Flight Control Room. We have some additional visitors beyond the usual flight controllers and flight directors that staff this room 24/7. In the center of your screen, you'll see NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman speaking with team members, specifically right now the Spartan flight controller. Isaacman is, of course, an accomplished astronaut himself, having flown on 2 missions aboard Dragon, so he is familiar with these procedures and what the crew might be experiencing right now. Back on the recovery ship, the teams continue to prepare to move Dragon to that egress platform. We'll get ready to officially welcome home the Crew-11 astronauts and cosmonaut. Again, that's NASA astronauts Zena Cardman and Mike Fink, JAXA's astronaut Kimya Yui, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Oleg Platonov, wrapping up a 167-day in space for these crew members. Again, if you're just joining us, thanks for tuning in. This is the live mission coverage of NASA's SpaceX Crew-11 mission returning from the International Space Station back to Earth. As you can see, this is the Dragon spacecraft, and splashdown occurred at 2:41 a.m. Central Time, right on time. This crew undocked at 4:20 p.m. Central Time, so it was about a 9.5-hour ride from space back to Earth. They wrapped up 165 days aboard the International Space Station, 167 days in total for this mission. And we are seeing motion for Dragon. They are pulling it to the egress platform. It's a short distance, and this view coming from that platform itself. This will align it properly with the side hatch, where we will see the astronauts egress or exit the capsule. They will be assisted after being checked on by a medical doctor, and this is standard procedure for all of our returning crews. We are getting confirmation that the spacecraft hatch is ready to be
Dragon
opened.
SpaceX,
Again, this will be the first
stand by
time.
for side hatch opening and egress. It's been an honor flying with you.
Standing by for side hatch, and the honor is ours. Thank you so much.
Good words from the Corps in SpaceX Mission Control to the crew. Again, with this side hatch open, this is the first breath of fresh air that this crew has gotten in 167 days since their launch back in August. That hatch opening coming at 3:19 a.m. Central Time, and with a splashdown occurring at 2:41 a.m. Central Time, a pretty rapid access of the crew. As previously discussed, the first team member to check on the crew is a SpaceX medical doctor, just giving them a once-over, making sure everyone's feeling all right and ready to exit the spacecraft. This is something we do with all crew members who return. And getting a quick picture inside the capsule is NASA photographer Bill Ingalls. Hey, there's your live view inside Dragon Crew-11 back on Earth after 167 days in space. Again, next on the checklist for tonight is crew egress or exit. Team members will be assisting them as they are helped out of the spacecraft. Again, it's been 167 days since they were back on Earth, so our standard procedure will be followed here as well, where they are assisted out of the spacecraft and placed on essentially a gurney, and then they will receive some medical checks aboard the ship before flying back to land. Team members inside the spacecraft from SpaceX's recovery team are helping remove some of those extra items that are in the spacecraft. You just saw the footrests being handed off. This will just make it easier for us to bring the crew out of the spacecraft. just over 40 minutes since our crew splashed down off the coast of San Diego. Again, that coming at 2:41 a.m. Central Time. We are expecting to see them exiting the spacecraft very soon. That's the chair the crew members will be helped into and moved back for their initial medical checks. Again, standard procedure for any returns on Dragon, as well as any of our crew members returning. If you've ever watched a crew return on a Soyuz spacecraft, we have a similar process where astronauts are carried from the capsule to waiting chairs and then carried again to a nearby medical tent. Again, you're watching live coverage of Crew-11's mission and return from the International Space Station, having undocked at 4:20 p.m. Central Time on January 14th, just yesterday, and splashing down at 2:41 a.m. Central Time today, January 15th. We are now just awaiting the crew to be helped out of the spacecraft. And it looks like our first crew member out of the spacecraft is NASA astronaut Mike Fink. Yes, that's the pilot of the Crew-11 mission aboard Dragon. Fink now being taken to those standard medical checks. And since we just saw Mike Fink, it's worth noting he now has 549 total days in space. That's the fourth all-time most days for NASA astronauts. Standing by for our next crew member to exit the spacecraft. That's NASA astronaut Zena Cardman, wrapping up her first mission to space, commander of the Crew-11 spacecraft. That's another footrest being handed out of the capsule, and we'll be standing by to see who is next to be brought out of the spacecraft. Again, you see them being helped onto these stretchers. They are being escorted back to their routine medical checks. Our next crew member to exit the spacecraft is JAXA's astronaut Kimya Yui. Yui just reached the milestone of 300 days in space across 2 missions. You can see some cheering on the SpaceX recovery ship, and you can probably also hear a little bit of celebration here in Mission Control Houston as well. That's another foot restraint, or a foot rest, I should say, being brought out of the spacecraft, clearing the way for our final crew member to exit, and that will be Roscosmos cosmonaut Oleg Platonov. And we see the fourth crew member of Crew-11 being helped from the vehicle now. That is Roscosmos cosmonaut Oleg Platonov, also wrapping up his first mission to space. Now that NASA astronauts Zena Cardman and Mike Fink, Kim Yayui of JAXA, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Oleg Platonov are safely back home on Earth and getting checked out by the medical teams, we're going to wrap up our live coverage of their return. This crew's journey concludes following a launch on August 1st, 2025, aboard a Falcon 9 rocket to the International Space Station. It was the fourth flight for Fink, who now has 549 days in space, the second for Yui with 309 days in space, and the first flight for Cardman and Platonov, who now have 167 days in space. With their mission coming to an end, the crew began packing up their research and personal items for the return to Earth last week. The Soyuz MS-28 crew, including NASA astronaut Chris Williams and Roscosmos cosmonauts Sergei Kutsverchkov and Sergei Mikheyev, remain aboard the space station and will continue their mission through this summer. Crew-12 is currently scheduled to launch as soon as mid-February and will provide more information once that is available.
Great news for Crew-11. They are home. The journey back began yesterday, about 13 hours ago, when they closed the hatch to Dragon and undocked from the International Space Station at 12:29 p.m. Pacific, 3:29 p.m. Eastern. Now, during this time, the spacecraft performed a number of maneuvers in preparation for re-entry to the Earth's atmosphere, with final splashdown occurring off the coast of San Diego, California, on time at 12:41 a.m. Pacific, 3:41 a.m. Eastern. And just a little less than an hour following splashdown, we saw Zena, Mike, Oleg, and Kimia make their way out of Dragon and into the recovery ship's medical facilities, safe and sound.
We just had some great words here in Mission Control from NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman, and we are still monitoring the crew as they continue their journey back to home. So after the checkouts on the ship, the crew will be flown to a local hospital for continued monitoring and checkouts using additional medical equipment not available aboard the space station. As NASA's Chief Health and Medical Officer J.D. Polk discussed last week, the crew member is stable and we were able to monitor their condition in orbit, but we want to take advantage of resources on Earth to provide the best care possible. NASA maintains relationships with local hospitals to ensure readiness for any post-landing needs, and for this return, we are utilizing that option as part of our normal preparedness process. Afterwards, the crew members will take a NASA plane for the short flight back to Houston. They'll then be reunited with families to bring an end to this mission.
Thank you, as always, for joining us for the coverage of Splashdown for Crew-11. Excuse me. Remember to follow SpaceX on X and NASA Online on social media for updates. Pardon me. There we go. For updates for the very latest on crew and cargo flights to and from the International Space Station. That's it for us here at SpaceX Hawthorne. Go Dragon and go Crew-11.
And we'll continue to share the progress of the crew on social media as they travel back home. We also have a post-splashdown news conference coming up at 2:45 a.m. Pacific Time, 5:45 a.m. Eastern Time, where leadership will share the latest updates as we conclude this mission. From all of us at NASA and SpaceX, it's been an honor. Thanks for joining, and welcome home, Crew-11.